Most of you aren't subscribed. Make sure to subscribe, as it helps out the channel. Without further ado, the series kicks off within the Police Department Division 1, where Supervisor Amamiya is furious at the fact that there has been a fifth victim with no new clues on the perpetrator. Turning to our MC Ishiki, Amamiya orders Ishiki to head home for the night, declaring that Ishiki being sleep-deprived will only slow down their investigations. Having a chat with Kiku, Ishiki fears that if he doesn't produce results soon, he'll get kicked out of the first division. Kiku reflects on how Ishiki was fooled by a criminal and allowed them to escape 3 times. And on top of that, Ishiki was once arrested for sneaking around at night, but Kiku praises Ishiki for pursuing justice, even though his methods aren't conventional. Ishiki says the recent murders have been stuck on his mind, something Kiku takes note of, as he uses the opportunity to allude to someone that can catch the current culprit at hand. Curious, Ishiki demands to know who this mysterious person is, but Kiku reveals that this genius detective is no ordinary man. Having been given the address, along with a picture of the genius detective, Kiku suggests that Ishiki visit him, leading Ishiki to an old apartment building in search of this detective. Entering the building, Ishiki wonders why the detective isn't working for the police full-time, but as Ishiki stumbles upon the detective's apartment building, Ishiki is told to go away as he tries to ring the doorbell. Believing that he must have heard wrong, Ishiki tries again, but once again is told to go away. Ishiki believes that he's being mistaken for someone else, but the detective orders Ishiki to go beg the gods for help in saving his job, surprising Ishiki as to how the detective knew he visited the shrine. When Ishiki tries to introduce himself as a fellow member of the police department, Ishiki gets ignored, but upon mentioning how Kiku was the one who told Ishiki to seek the detective's advice, the detective reluctantly opens the door, revealing his disheveled look. Ishiki is in complete shock, wondering if this is the same Kamonohashi Ron as the slick-back gentleman in the photos, frightened to see Kamo's dead eyes and unkempt hair. Having been insulted enough, Kamo retreats back into his apartment, prompting Ishiki to follow after, asking how Kamo knows Kiku, but almost steps on Kamo's cat. Kamo reveals that he was friends with Kiku's son, grateful that Kiku took care of him when he was young. As for the cat, Kiku sent it to Kamo fearing that Kamo would be alone. Kamo suddenly collapses to the ground, but Ishiki realizes that the ground has been padded, the windows are completely shut, also learning that Kamo has no internet connection, completely cutting himself off from the outside world. Seeing Kamo's list of how depressing his life has become, Ishiki tries to ask Kamo something, but Kamo simply refuses, stating that he knows Kiku has sent Ishiki to be his partner, but sadly reveals that Ishiki isn't the first person Kiku has sent, as Kamo has rejected and humbled everyone Kiku has sent. When Ishiki hears that Kamo has retired from being a detective, Ishiki asks for Kamo's advice on a recent murder case, but out of nowhere Kamo begins screaming, annoying Ishiki, as Kamo says he doesn't want to hear about any murders. Seeing as there is nothing that can be done, Ishiki turns to leave, but gets curious as to how Kamo knew he visited a shrine recently to beg gods for help. Kamo states that he noticed some pine pollen on Ishiki's shoulder, something that can be found around a nearby shrine. Coupled that with a can of coffee in Ishiki's left pocket and some spare change in his right, Kamo deduced that Ishiki had visited the Wakana shrine bright and early. Amazed that Kamo was spot on, Kamo gets annoyed that Ishiki is still here. Kamo adds that he can tell his grandparents raised Ishiki due to Ishiki's attitude. Smirking, Kamo states that he knows Ishiki is here seeking Kamo's help to avoid being kicked from Division 1, but is curious as to why Kiku would send someone like Ishiki that is reliant on others, someone that Kamo is well known to hate. Ishiki believes that Kamo will be able to solve the most recent murder, but when Kamo refuses, Ishiki begins screaming out the details of the recent murders, annoyed to see Kamo has put in earplugs to block out Ishiki's words. Trying to persuade Kamo, Ishiki suddenly gets a call from Amamiya, but gets his phone knocked away by Kamo, ordering Ishiki to not talk about work in his presence. Sadly, Ishiki had answered the phone, hearing Amamiya report that a 6th body had been found in Kazahana Park in Shibuya, ordering Ishiki to head there since he's the closest. Before Ishiki can leave, he spots Kamo writhing in pain, uttering that he can't hold himself back any longer. Ishiki learns that Kamo can't resist solving a case once he learns of the details, having been forced to retire from being a detective, something Ishiki believes is due to Kamo's weak body. Kamo orders Ishiki to leave, as Kamo plans to knock himself out with some sleeping pills. But Ishiki is very persistent on Kamo solving the case, reminding Kamo that human lives are at stake. Intrigued by Ishiki's genuine passion, Kamo agrees to visit the crime scene, but warns Ishiki to never allow himself to leave Ishiki's sight. As both men jog to the scene of the crime, Ishiki is amazed at Kamo's athleticism, shocked to hear Kamo trains 4 hours a day in his home gym. As Ishiki and Kamo are taken to the victim's body, they learn that the victim is a private investment broker, Okamesa. Apparently, Okamesa didn't end up going to a scheduled party last night. But as a police officer recounts some more details, Kamo suddenly lays down next to the victim's corpse. Kamo begins uttering that the victim had drowned, scolding the corpse for handing over their valuable goods without a fight. But this makes the police officer wonder how Kamo knows all of this without hearing about the other corpses. Kamo states that the white froth from the victim's mouth indicates possibility of drowning, and since his suit is still intact, Kamo deduces that his watch along with his wallet must have been stolen as well. Hearing all of this, Ishiki states that the other victims had similar deaths, all having their bodies intact, with no signs of poisoning, only their valuable goods were stolen, and their bodies seemed to have drowned. Kamo asks for more details on the victims, only to be handed a tablet of all the victims and where they were heading before their deaths. Seeing no overlap between victims, Ishiki wonders if there was a location to drown the victims, giving Kamo an idea of who the perpetrator is and where they can be. Leaping onto his legs, Kamo declares they'll be heading out, but first asks Ishiki for some spare cash. With Kamo disguising Ishiki in a fancy-looking outfit, they have to change Ishiki's hair at a nearby hair salon, but Ishiki notes how he's sleep-deprived, so he'll probably fall asleep. As Ishiki heads inside to meet with the barber, Kamo lays outside, weirding out some kids, with Ishiki and the barber having some small chit-chat. The barber asks for Ishiki to place his hair into the basin to be shampooed. As the barber heads off to retrieve some towels, the barber prepares to take out another item, but suddenly realizes that Ishiki has fallen asleep, smirking as he turns on the sink to drown Ishiki. Out of nowhere, Kamo appears, revealed to have picked the door's lock, declaring that the killer is the barber, but at the same time Ishiki lifts his head, having followed Kamo's instruction to hold his breath. Kamo reveals that the victims exhibited no signs of passing due to drugs or violence, since the barber has specially crafted a basin that poured out oxygen-deficient air. Something, when coupled with water, would immediately cause the victims to faint only to then drown. Kamo reveals that all the victims had messy hair. Therefore, the murderer only targeted people that were looking for a haircut, and by narrowing down the shops to ones that accept walk-ins and a place not known to many. Kamo states that the barber targeted only the rich, hence why Ishiki had to change his outfit, but when Kamo reveals they are detectives, the barber knocks down some shelves, fleeing. As the two chase after Barber, Kamo reveals that he had locked down the barber's escape route, demanding to know the barber's motive behind killing 6 people. When the barber declares that he hates the rich and doesn't regret his actions, Kamo suddenly orders the barber to jump to his death, weird as Kamo's eyes are suddenly glowing. With the barber now sharing those glowing eyes, the barber mindlessly follows Kamo's orders, all whilst Ishiki rushes to stop the barber. As Kamo snaps out of it, he scolds himself for letting his curse take effect once more, but surprisingly, Ishiki had managed to catch the barber before he jumped, buying Kamo enough time to save them both with a makeshift bungee rope. As the other detectives arrive, Kamo fills Ishiki in on his curse that causes him to slay the murder culprit, revealing that Kamo has a 100% success rate on solving cases, but his capture rate is 0. Realizing why Kiku sent Ishiki, Kamo declares that Ishiki's ability to protect others will overcome Kamo's fatal flaw, declaring that they'll work together moving forward. Flashing back, we see several people gathered around a young Kamo, completely amazed that Kamo was able to solve a cold case. Given the title of the smartest student in his school, Kamo's peers and teachers have high hopes for Kamo's future, a future where Kamo plans to become a detective. With a new day arriving, Ishiki visits Kamo's apartment, frightened when Kamo suddenly opens the door, excited to see Ishiki. Ishiki apologizes as he hasn't been assigned a case, disappointing as Kumo returns into his apartment, laying on the ground. Ishiki notices Kumo mumbling, annoyed that Kumo is blaming him for wasting his talent. But Ishiki gets curious upon learning Kumo used to attend Blue Academy, the world's most elite detective training academy. The academy also produced all the best detectives known to date, but although Kumo ranked higher than them all, during a practical exam, Kumo had wounded up slaughtering all the attendees, leading to Kumo being expelled and forbidden from obtaining his detective license. Ishiki wonders what's so important about a detective license, but Kumo reveals that the license gives detectives access to the world's toughest mysteries. But sadly, Kumo will be executed by Blue if he even tries looking into any cases. Suddenly realizing that Kumo technically looked in the barber case with him, Ishiki fears what is going to happen to Kumo, but Kumo states that he'll have to lay low from here on out. Kumo reassures Ishiki that they'll still solve cases together, but Ishiki will have to do the digging whilst Kumo guides him. Ishiki refuses to be Kumo's puppet, but Kumo ignores Ishiki's cries, stating that he'll disguise himself when showing up to crime scenes, as Kumo needs to see and pay respect to the victims. When Ishiki tries to back out, Kumo simply scolds Ishiki for not bringing any cases to him, but Ishiki reveals that his boss, Amamiya, decides what he works on. When Kumo is curious as to who Amamiya is, Ishiki shows Kumo a picture of her, prompting Kumo to compliment Amamiya's looks, but also deduces that someone must have taken the photo for Ishiki. Ishiki admits that it was a co-worker that fancied Amamiya, but as for himself, he personally is quite scared of her, something Kumo has noticed as well. Apparently this morning, Division 1 had received a report of a male corpse in his 20s with a head injury, but upon seeing a picture of the body, Amamiya went to check the scene of the crime, leaving Ishiki with his tasks to complete. Kumo praises Ishiki for receiving a task only he can solve, but Ishiki reveals that he's only ever assigned easy and boring tasks, with the most recent one being a report of missing money from a piggy bank. Ishiki apologizes for such a boring task, but Kumo states that he'll make everyone respect Ishiki, springing to his feet, donning a disguise, only to declare that no case shall go unsolved. As the two leave, Ishiki almost steps on the cat again, only to visit and introduce themselves to the girl that had reported the crime. Upon entering the women's house, Kumo strangely begins tinkering with a suitcase, believing it to be the piggy bank, but learns the girl's sister is home and it's her suitcase. Led to the actual piggy bank, Kumo is amazed that the girl has a rubber piggy bank. Ishiki begins asking questions, learning that the girl and her sister were out the other day, only to return and notice money missing from her piggy bank. Exploring the room, Kumo gets his mustache stuck in some of the sister's jewelry. But when Ishiki scolds Kumo for not taking the case seriously, Kumo asks Ishiki why he thinks none of the jewelry had been stolen when the piggy bank was robbed. Ishiki admits that he has no idea, but the girl does add that she's been getting some silent phone calls lately and has been locking up early. Smirking, Kumo states that everything makes sense, collapsing to the ground only to declare that he gives up. As Ishiki scolds Kumo for giving up so easily, the sister comes home. Sitting down with the two girls, Ishiki learns that the sister was visiting her parents when the crime took place, but the girl butts in promising that she isn't lying about her piggy bank being lighter when they returned home. When the sister says the girl is simply imagining things, Kumo speaks up, suggesting that they all give up. As the girl declares that she remembered her piggy bank being tough like an iron statue, Kumo declares that he has all the pieces he needs to solve the issues, asking to break open the piggy bank. As they open up the piggy bank, the girl attempts to count the coins, but Kumo stops her, declaring that they will have forensics look for fingerprints. In the meantime, Kumo heads out for some fresh air. Cutting to later that afternoon, Kumo is seen on a hill near a creek where Ishiki has met up with Kumo, reporting that none of the coins had the girl's fingerprint. As Kumo turns around, he reveals that they are at the same crime scene as Amamiya's this morning, both heading down to have a closer look. As Ishiki introduces Kumo as a friend, Kumo asks if Amamiya would be impressed if Ishiki solved the case, but entertaining Kumo's offer, Amamiya threatens to fire Ishiki if he doesn't solve the case. As Kumo lays down next to the corpse, he declares that everything is ready, tossing Ishiki a bag. Taking the stage, Ishiki starts by explaining the case of the missing money from the piggy bank, but Amamiya cuts Ishiki off, asking him to skip over such a trivial task. With Kamo standing up for Ishiki, Ishiki explains that the coins in the piggy bank only had the sister's fingerprint, taking out an exact replica of the girl's piggy bank and explaining that the coins weren't stolen and instead were replaced. Ishiki concludes that the sister is the culprit, but with a shaken look, the sister asks why she would ever have to lie about breaking the girl's piggy bank. Calming his nerves, Ishiki states that it has to do with the corpse of the man, something the girl does not deny. Ishiki deduces that the girl had returned home one day, only to stumble onto a stalker waiting for her, but having been chased in her living room by said stalker, the girl reached for the piggy bank, shattering and killing the man in self-defense. Since the coins were all covered in blood, the sister failed to fill a new piggy bank with the same amount of coins and ended up moving the body to the nearby creek with her suitcase. With Ishiki finishing up his deduction, the girl asks her sister for the truth, but the sister admits that Ishiki was correct. When Ishiki tries to defend the sister for attacking the man in self-defense, Amamiya mentions that covering up a murder is a crime in itself. But out of nowhere, Kamo's eyes glow, prompting Kamo to order the sister to drown in the creek. With Ishiki holding Kamo back and everyone weirded out, the sister suddenly begins running towards the river, but when Amamiya attempts to grab a hold of the sister manages to break free. Luckily, Ishiki had chased the sister all the way into the water, allowing for Kamo to see the sister alive and well, just as he returned to his senses. Back at the station, Amamiya reports that Ishiki was right about the murder, but Amamiya is more curious about Kamo, having taken a liking to him. As Ishiki heads over to tell Kamo the good news, Kamo comes stumbling out of his apartment again, making Ishiki want to solve more difficult cases with Kamo, curious as to what Kamo is truly capable of. Cutting elsewhere, we enter the Blue Academy, where Principal Emmerich is asked during a meeting if she remembers Kamonohashi Ron of the 87th class. With and the anatomy instructor acknowledging that they do, the vice principal reveals that there have been reports of Kamo restarting his detective adventures, with various instructors arguing for and against Kamo being a detective once more. The principal orders for the tracking instructor to look into Kamo. Following Ishiki, we see him receive a call, suddenly rushing to a supermarket to meet up with Kamo, annoyed that Kamo is calling him to help shop for groceries. Kamo notes how normally people bring him food since he doesn't have money, but today is important since his cat ran out of food, forcing Ishiki to pay for Kamo's groceries. The employee reveals that the store is having a raffle today, handing Kamo a raffle ticket, which leads the two boys to the raffle station, where they read over the prizes. As Kamo steps up to spin the wheel, Kamo puts his all into the spin, shocked to see a golden ball appear, prompting the employee to announce that Kamo has won a hot spring vacation for two people. Kamo says he'll simply go twice instead of taking Ishiki, but the employee reminds Kamo that the trip is a one-time thing, threatening to cancel the trip if Kamo doesn't take someone else. As Kamo reluctantly fills out a form for himself and Ishiki, the employee mentions how the first place and second place prizes had already been won. But as Kamo and Ishiki leave, we see the tracking instructor hear about Kamo's hot spring trip. On the day of the trip, Kamo and Ishiki head to Benizome by taxi, learning that it was raining up until yesterday, only to be handed a pamphlet for the inn they'll be staying at. The taxi driver states that the location is called Benizome as the autumn leaves around the hot springs give off a Benny crimson color. But Kamo notices that they've been given the wrong pamphlet, as they are staying at the annex, not the main building. Acting weird, the taxi driver apologizes, handing Ishiki a single black and white piece of paper, swiftly dropping the boys off, only to speed off. Upon seeing the beat-up state of the Benizome annex, the boys wonder if the annex is even open, but out of nowhere some employees appear, along with the tracking instructor disguised as the innkeeper. The instructor thanks Ishiki for his police work, surprising Ishiki as he wonders how the instructor knows. But the instructor reveals that Ishiki's leather shoes are worn down, a common trait of police officers. With Ishiki amazed, Kamo steps up, correcting the instructor as reporters are just as likely to have worn down leather shoes, deducing that the instructor must have used the forms they filled, something the instructor doesn't deny. As the instructor leads the boys inside, he hands the boys a key to the hot spring, giving the boys until 8 a.m. the next day to use the hot spring, adding that dinner will be at 7 p.m. that night. Hearing that there are times for everything, the boys learn that there are 3 other parties staying at the same inn. But as the boys leave to check out the hot springs, the instructor gets excited, finally able to test out Kamo's capabilities. With Kamo and Ishiki enjoying the outdoors hot spring, Ishiki notes how the hot spring makes up for the rundown building, but Kamo adds that there is a legend the taxi driver didn't tell them about this inn. Kamo states that since the rivers nearby are so fast-flowing, it was common to have the hot spring overflow, so the innkeepers sacrifice a woman to stop the floods, but this ultimately led the hot springs to take on a crimson color. As Ishiki gets freaked out, he suddenly notices that Kamo's scar is bigger than he expected, learning that Kamo once received wounds all over his body, but only the scar on his neck remained. Ishiki notices a number in the scar, which Kamo confirms to be the number 6, representing his birth, but Kamo takes the chance to tease Ishiki for being a grandma's boy. Heading to the Benny room for some dinner, Kamo and Ishiki sit amongst the other guests, with Kamo being served an omuris covered in black sugar syrup. Kamo reveals that black sugar syrup helps him think, but Ishiki knows Kamo just likes sweets. Turning around, Kamo watches as a man and women are served some amazing array of dishes, along with a lone woman eating alone. But Kamo notes how there is one group of members missing, as the instructor said there will be 4 in total. Kamo smirks excitedly as for what is to come, taking out the Game of Life board game, only to ask Ishiki to play with him. But Ishiki apologizes to the other guests since Kamo is being too loud. Ishiki tells Kamo that it's conventional to play ping pong at the hot springs, something Kamo isn't against, finishing up their dinner, only to head to ping pong tables. Ishiki voices how dirty the room in general is, but Kamo notices an ancient scroll retelling the story of the Crimson Hue, making Kamo and Ishiki wonder if the legend is true. As the two prepare for their first match of ping pong, Kamo begins his serve, all whilst declaring that the loser must become the winner's slave for life. Completely caught off guard, Ishiki accidentally deflects the ball out a broken window, spotting it on a rock in the nearby river. Since there are no more balls, they both reason they should retrieve the lost ball, but with several minutes passing, the boys are quivering, having lost the ball in the river. As the boys hop into the hot spring to warm up, a sudden silhouette approaches, revealed to be Amamiya, who is also here to enjoy the hot spring. With Amamiya's cries echoing through the night, everyone is gathered in the dining area at around 10 p.m., all noticing Amamiya, who is completely embarrassed, having found out that she stumbled into the men's bathing area, afraid that Kamo now thinks she's a pervert. Just then, the woman from the other table cries that she wants a divorce, shocking her husband, but luckily Amamiya butts in, begging them not to divorce. With Ishiki realizing that Amamiya is drunk, Amamiya drunkenly heads elsewhere. But due to the commotion, the woman realizes she overreacted, telling her husband that she needs to cool down in the hot spring. Seeing that the husband is now alone, Kamo asks if he wants to play his Game of Life board game, managing to also convince the blonde women to join in as well. Cutting several hours later at 2 a.m., Kamo is dead last, all whilst the husband and the blonde dream of reliving their lives. Since it's already late, they pack up the board game, heading to sleep, all whilst the instructor watches from nearby. The next morning, a blood-curdling cry can be heard, following Amamiya, who runs into an employee who discovered a body. As everyone heads to the hot spring, they spot the wife's corpse floating in the hot spring, forcing Ishiki to hold back the husband as he cries out his wife's name, Sachiko. Amamiya notices that the body is entering rigor mortis, meaning that the death must have occurred sometime between midnight and 2 a.m. Getting close, Kamo promises to avenge Sachiko, something Amamiya finds very attractive. Kamo notes how there are too many leaves on the corpse's body, but the blonde woman cries that it is a curse, something that makes Kamo smirk. Signaling for Ishiki to take over, Ishiki begins asking the employee if they heard anything weird last night, but the employee reveals that since the inn is small, only one person takes turns watching over the employees, revealing that the instructor last night watched over everyone. The instructor brings up that he saw everyone playing the board game last night, all but Sachiko and Amamiya, declaring that Amamiya must be the culprit. As Amamiya hangs her head in shame, Kamo declares that Amamiya is innocent and that the culprit is someone else, stating that he'll prove that to everyone. Hearing that Kamo declares that he'll solve something, the instructor smirks, waiting for Kamo to overstep and allow Blue Academy to end Kamo's career. Sadly for the instructor, Kamo corrects himself, stating that Ishiki will be the one solving the case, scaring Ishiki as he has no idea where to start. Kamo cuts Ishiki off, stating that Ishiki has already found all the clues needed, revealing that they should focus on the secret legend of Benizome and how the water would turn red with leaves. The husband wonders if Amamiya can be cleared of suspicions, but Kamo is more curious as to why Amamiya looks so confused, learning that Amamiya didn't come by taxi and hence didn't read the pamphlets that told the legend. As Ishiki remembers Amamiya saying she came alone, Kamo expands on what Ishiki is saying, revealing that Amamiya came from the stations whereas the others only know of the legend since they took the taxi. Kamo concludes that the murder of Sachiko was an attempt to recreate the legend. Therefore, Amamiya can't be the culprit since she doesn't know what the legend is about, something that employees can confirm since the inn doesn't speak of the legend. With the instructor baffled that Ishiki came up with all of this, Kamo asks Ishiki who he thinks the murder was, but when Ishiki states he doesn't know, Kamo jokes that it may actually be the work of a curse. Just then the blonde speaks up, stating that last night as she was heading to dinner, she saw some white mist appearing from the hot spring, believing it to be something paranormal. At the same time, Kamo cries that he's found something, but when Ishiki goes to check what it is, he realizes it's their ping pong ball from last night. Kamo concludes that the rain last night must have washed everything downstream, suddenly spotting a bath mat nearby, wondering if it could be used to retrieve the ping pong ball. As Amamiya appears, she heads directly to Ishiki, only to reluctantly thank Ishiki for clearing her of suspicion earlier. Although Amamiya is clear of suspicion, Amamiya admits that the others won't trust her to lead the investigation, assigning Ishiki to take over the case, something Ishiki gladly accepts. With Amamiya reverting back to insulting Ishiki, she scolds herself for strangely acting weird yesterday, but upon hearing this, Kamo declares that he now has all the pieces he needs. Seeing Kamo's glorious eyes, Amamiya can't help but faint at the sight of Kamo's beauty, but at the same time the police arrive, making everyone lock eyes with each other. Heading upstairs, Kamo heads into one of the rooms, prompting the instructor to follow after Kamo, both entering adjacent rooms. As Ishiki fills the police in on what had transpired, the instructor smirks as he listens into Kamo's room. When Ishiki enters Kamo's room, he reports that the police have confirmed Sachiko had passed due to heart failure, something the husband was afraid would be the death of Sachiko. As Kamo asks for more information, the instructor is seen on the edge of his seat, waiting for Kamo to say something that the instructor can report to Blue Academy, but out of nowhere Kamo slams his hand onto the nearby wall. Having bought some time, Ishiki explains that Sachiko's heart failure was due to the difference in temperature between the outside and wet inside, something Kamo was waiting to hear, telling Ishiki that he now has all the pieces to solve the case himself. As Ishiki gathers everyone around, he declares that the case was indeed murder, stating that it's someone amongst them. Ishiki states that the murderer must have known of Sachiko's weak heart, declaring the husband to be the murderer, but the husband nervously asks why he would murder his own wife. When the husband reminds everyone that he was with everyone at the time of Sachiko's death, Ishiki interjects, stating that the husband had an alibi, but the husband had set a trap for his wife. As the husband panics, Ishiki takes out a bath mat, placing it at the top of the stairs into the hot spring, revealing that the husband hoped his wife would trip over. When Amamiya scolds Ishiki for his outrageous claim, Ishiki reveals that Sachiko had very poor vision, meaning without her glasses, she would easily fall for a simple trap. The blonde speaks up, wondering if that was enough to induce thermal shock, but Ishiki corrects everyone, stating that the hot spring wasn't filled with warm water, but instead freezing water. With everyone wondering how cold water could enter the hot spring, Ishiki shows off a discarded rain gutter, explaining that the gutter could have been used to draw ice-cold water from the nearby river, whilst also filtering out the warm water. This also explains why the blonde lady saw the mist last night, as it was the hot spring water being dumped into the nearby river. Finally, as for the abundant amount of leaves near Sachiko's body, Ishiki deduces that the river water must have naturally drawn in leaves, and because the man couldn't remove all the leaves in time, he instead chose to add more. hoping to pin it on the curse. Refusing to be accused, the husband declares that there was no way a man could set all of this up in the women's bath, but Ishiki states that the husband had swapped the bath curtains, explaining why Amamiya wound up in the men's bath. When the husband still refuses to accept such claims, Ishiki simply states that they'll check both curtains for fingerprints, ultimately making the husband finally admit to murder. Out of nowhere, the husband apologizes to the blonde, Michiyo, revealing that he had been having an affair with Michiyo, but even Michiyo is disgusted at the husband for slaying his own wife. As the police take away the husband, Ishiki searches for Kumo, spotting Kumo hiding behind some trees. Upon chasing after Kumo, Ishiki suddenly spots the instructor in a new outfit along with Kumo tied to a tree. The instructor reveals himself as the tracking instructor for Blue Academy, Spitfire, revealing that he's here to determine if Kumo is trying to work as a detective once more. Kumo reveals that he knew Spitz was following him ever since they won the raffle, reassuring Spitz that Ishiki was doing all the detective work, but Spitz refuses to accept that. Kumo mocks Spitz for being so naive, stating how Spitz allowed himself to be spotted so easily, but this only enrages Spitz further. Spitz promises that if Kumo admits to doing detective work, he'll have Kumo's sentence be lighter, but Kumo deduces that Spitz has no such authority, especially since Spitz had to disguise himself. As Kumo begins cutting himself down, he hypothesizes that Spitz is quite desperate, either from making a bet, from being threatened, or is in need of Kumo's abilities. Completely read like a book, Spitz apologizes for everything, admitting that he needs Kumo's help. Spitz says that he's honed his abilities to track people down in order to find his missing family, but having found no one at Blue Academy that could help, Spitz was desperate to consult Kumo himself. Upon hearing everything, Kumo refuses to help, especially since they haven't gotten to know Spitz yet. Spitz admits that it's normal to not trust him yet, but he promises to earn Kumo's trust, promising to report that Ishiki was the one that solved the case to the Blue higher-ups. With Ishiki happy to see that Spitz isn't a bad guy after all, Spitz praises Ishiki for solving Sachiko's death earlier, swinging away, but promises to help with any tracking stuff in the future. Now alone, Kumo states that since Ishiki trusts him, Kumo will give Spitz a chance, but Ishiki changes topics, thanking Kumo for saving Amamiya earlier. Several days later, Amamiya tells Ishiki that there will be a joint investigation into the serial murders within the Aichi Prefecture, partnering with Eagle Eye Kawasemi Omido, a very skilled detective. When Ishiki begins praising Kawasemi for possibly becoming a superintendent, Ishiki realizes that Amamiya is also gunning for that position, finding out that Amamiya plans to have Ishiki collaborate with Kawasemi. Out of nowhere, Kawasemi arrives, immediately scolding several officers for not meeting correct dress codes. Something Amamiya notes is due to his keen eyes along with his signature tweezers. Amamiya does admit that Kawasemi acts the same to higher-ups, making Kawasemi someone hard to be manipulated, adding that herself and Kawasemi used to work together for a bit. Spotting Ishiki standing by, Sawasemi approaches Ishiki, coldly declaring that Ishiki doesn't look fit to be a detective. With Amamiya and Kawasemi face to face, Kawasemi tries to order Amamiya around, but Amamiya simply destroys Sawasemi's tweezers, prompting Sawasemi to summon Yamane. Yamane immediately brings replacement tweezers, all whilst providing Sawasemi with folders on their upcoming case. Recognizing the name, Amamiya asks if Yamane is Sawasemi's partner, learning that Sawasemi considers himself the greatest detective ever, and that Yamane is simply happy to work for said greatest detective. Pushing Ishiki forward, Amamiya states that Ishiki will be collaborating with Sawasemi, but Sawasemi states that he can't even sense Ishiki's presence, heading off to the crime scene with Yamane. Upon arriving at the scene, Yamane explains that there was a truck transferring works of arts, with one piece wounding up being a real human corpse with no hands. Sawasemi utters that he's seen something similar before, but when Ishiki tries to ask about it, Sawasemi and Yamane simply ignore Ishiki. Knowing that he must try to contribute somehow, Ishiki suddenly spots Kumo in a new disguise, revealing that he's here to help give Ishiki guidance on the case. Introducing himself to the others, Kumo tosses Sawasemi his business card, introducing himself as a consultant and a puppet master. Annoyed, Sawasami kindly asks Kumo to leave, but Kumo reassures Sawasami that he's no ordinary consultant. Having something on his mind, Sawasami charges at Kumo's platypus puppet, declaring that platypus beaks are meant to be soft, but is surprised that Kumo already knew that. Allowing Kumo to stick around, Kumo learns that Sawasami is another great detective, prompting Kumo to crumple his hand puppet, declaring that they'll solve the case first. When Ishiki mentions how Sawasami has been withholding information from them, Kumo confronts Yamane, learning that there have been 3 other similar cases, where victims have been killed with a stab to the chest, but wound up with 2 severed hands. Yamane declares the murderer to have the name Hand Collector, something that gets Kumo fired up, knowing that he'll be greater than Sawasami if Kumo can solve the case first. Sadly, Yamane reveals that Sawasami had already narrowed down the case to a few suspects, with them even confronting who they believe is the murderer last night. But unfortunately, both Sawasami and Yamane were unable to subdue the Hand Collector. Sawasami states that he'll be the one to capture the Hand Collector, but Sawasami does reveal that the culprit they let get away is the most recent victim inside the truck. With Kumo intrigued, he enters the truck, kneeling before the victim, only to observe that the victim must have been taken to a warm place, having worn light clothing during such a cold time. Spotting a tattoo on the victim's arm, Kumo wonders what type of bird it could be, but Yamane chimes in, stating that it is a kelp bird, and it matches the tattoo the man had last night. Out of nowhere, Kumo asks for help taking off his hand puppets, but this makes Sawasami scold Kumo for having put faith in Kumo. As Ishiki helps Kumo pull off his hand puppets to the side, Kumo times it perfectly, allowing Ishiki to fall back whilst removing the hand puppets in Sawasami's direction. With Sawasami easily evading Ishiki falls into Yamane, prompting Kumo to declare that Sawasami is lying. Intrigued, Sawasami hears Ishiki, with the help of Kumo, accuse Sawasami of having extraordinary reflexes and agility, meaning there was no way Sawasami failed to capture the handcuffed culprit last night. Sawasami notes how he did hear about a brilliant detective solving cases recently, shocked to hear that it was Ishiki, but Sawasami admits that he did lie. Sawasami reveals that Yamane was the one that let the culprit escape, having come back with a missing button on his sleeve, but seeing as Yamane works for Sawasami takes the blame for not training Yamane correctly, something Ishiki realizes is quite admirable. As Yamane apologizes for failing, Kumo suddenly utters that Yamane is still missing a button on his sleeve, freaking Yamane out as he utters that he doesn't want to disappoint Sawasami again. Luckily, Kumo reveals that he had used Yamane's lost button for an eye on his platypus, prompting Yami to utter that he found the button this time, but this gives Kumo all the clues he needs to solve the case. Taking out his phone, Kumo phones a mysterious person, putting him on speaker, making Ishiki realize that it's the tracking instructor Spitz. Spitz states the most recent victim is 48-year-old Mushino Koji Minoru, and having visited his apartment, Spitz reveals that Mushino Koji is indeed the hand collector, having stored all the hands in his apartment and fridge. As Ishiki and Kumo head elsewhere, Kumo tells Sawasami that Ishiki will be the one to solve the case, cutting to Kumo and Ishiki in a bathroom, where Kumo tells Ishiki some crucial details. That evening, Kumo and Ishiki return, with Ishiki now stating that he'll explain everything that transpired. Ishiki starts by confirming that Mushino Koji is indeed the hand collector, but the reason for his death is due to a copycat, but Sawasami already knew all of this. Ishiki reveals that Mushino Koji actually stabbed himself in the heart, having given up when Yamane and Sawasami cornered him. But at the time, Mushino Koji had a jacket, so someone must have hid the jacket to make the copycat murder seem realistic. Sawasami realizes that since only he and Yamane were the only two that were with Mushino Koji last night, it means Yamane must be the copycat. When Yamane tries to refuse such a claim, Ishiki reminds Yamane that last night it would have been impossible to see anything when chasing after Mushino Koji, but the fact that Yamane had enough time to recognize Mushino Koji's unique tattoo makes Yamane suspicious. Still refuting Ishiki's claims, Ishiki reveals that Yamane had lost his handcuffs the previous night, hence why he panicked when he had lost his button. Ishiki suspects that Yamane had lost his handcuffs during his pursuit of the culprit, But seeing the opportunity, Yamane had made Mushino Kuji escape with said handcuffs, only to sever Mushino Kuji's hands to cover his bases. With Sawasumi unable to believe his most trusted committed something so foul, Ishiki reminds Sawazum that Yamane did everything out of desperation to live up to Sawasumi's standards. As Yamane collapses admitting to everything, Sawasumi helplessly watches as Yami is taken away, but Sawasumi promises to wait for his one true partner to return, bringing Yamane to tears. Turning to Ishiki and Kamo, Sawasumi reveals that he's jealous of their partnership, revealing that he knows Kamo is the true mastermind. But as Ishiki complains about how annoying Kamo is, Sawasumi praises Amemiya for having such a unique specimen like Ishiki. With several more days passing by, Ishiki chooses to check up on Koma, frightened to see that Koma has bloodshot eyes, but realizes that Koma had simply been addicted to watching psychics on TV. Following the show, Psychic Abilities, Fact or Fiction, we see the host Ono Yako introduce the psychic Torage Dankichi, who needs to persuade the neurosurgeon Yusaki Mafu of their psychic abilities. The host spots Mafu sleeping, so Yako wakes Mafu up, asking why Mafu has all the bandages, amused to hear Mafu ran into issues when cutting an apple. When Ishiki wonders if Mafu is really a neurosurgeon, Kamo confirms that Mafu has 0.001 accuracy, but Ishiki thinks it's hard to believe seeing how clumsy Mafu is. As the host asks what psychic ability Torage will demonstrate today, Torage states that he'll be controlling people's mind with simply writing, something Kamo is excited to hear. Kamo explains that he actually doesn't believe in psychics, but Kamo wants them to be real in order to have more fun and complicated cases. With Torage starting off his demonstration, he calls for a participant in the crowd, promising to reward them with 100,000 yen if they can resist his psychic influence. Having the participant sit down with noise-canceling headphones, Torage begins scribbling down a command for the participant, shocking everyone when the participant suddenly begins jumping when they read it, just as Torage declared they would. When Torage writes for the participant to run, the participant is suddenly overwhelmed to follow the command upon reading it, but Kamo has already figured out the trick. Mafu interjects, stating that she knows the participant is working with Torage. Having analyzed Torage's current and previous participant demonstration, Mafu is able to deduce that everything had been staged. Impressed, Torage comes up with a counter-argument, stating that he'll now take the participant's life, scribbling down the word death, only to have the participant faint, declaring that a staged participant wouldn't willingly pass away. As the live broadcast cuts off the show, Kamo declares that they have no time to waste, both heading to the scene of the crime. As Ishiki introduces himself to the on-site police, Kamo is seen disguised as Torage's fanboy, getting up and close with the victim's corpse, but this draws Torage's attention. Seeing that Torage is nearby, Kamo flat out asks how Torage killed the participant, but Torage firmly states that he used his psychic abilities. Torage adds that there are no modern laws that can send him to jail. Something Ishiki knows is also true, as he can't use psychic rules as actual evidence. But Kamo is more interested in getting Torage's autograph. Torage uses the same marker he used to order the participant around to sign his autograph. Both Kamo and Ishiki note how thick the signature is, but as Torage leaves, he smirks, blaming Mafu for not believing in his psychic abilities, which led Torage to take a life. Now checking in on Mafu, the boys meet Mafu's assistant Shikata, reassuring Mafu that the death of the participant was not Mafu's fault. Mafu refuses to accept that she allowed someone to die in front of her as a trained professional. Kamo asks if Mafu believes in psychics, but Mafu isn't too sure, having diagnosed the participant was killed due to poison, specifically something potent. Hearing this, Kamo declares that he agrees, having spotted a mark on the victim's neck that could have been from a poison needle. Ishiki asks how Torage would have poisoned the participant, but Mafu reveals that Torage never made any suspicious actions towards the participant, and that there was no one behind the participant. As Mafu begins admitting defeat, Kamo jokingly states how proud he is of Torage, but upon hearing that Mafu had come directly from a surgery just to prove the psychic wrong, Kamo declares that they'll solve the case for Mafu. With everyone shocked at Kamo's change in demeanor, Kamo states that Ishiki will solve this case, going over the events that transpired. Kamo recounts that when the participant was ordered to die, he shut his eyes only to collapse to the floor, But when Mafu gave the participant CPR, the participant briefly came back, only to stop breathing again. Ishiki reports that there were no signs of a poison needle use, making Ishiki believe that psychics exist. But Kumo reveals that he has all the pieces he needs, stating that the trick involves the fact that it was done on TV. As Mafu gives Kumo some eye drops, we cut to Ishiki gathering everyone around, stating that he'll now reenact what Torich had done. Standing in the same position as Torich, Ishiki asks Mafu to act as the participant, and Ishiki will hold up the same cue cards, asking to borrow Torich's marker. With Torich refusing to lend Ishiki his marker, Mafu gets annoyed, scolding Torich for taking the matter too lightly, but accidentally trips, managing to grab a hold of one off Torich's many markers in the process. Ishiki puts noise-canceling headphones on Mafu, first ordering Mafu to jump and run, but everyone is skeptical at what Ishiki is trying to prove. Next, Ishiki holds up the death cue card, asking Mafu to stand next to him while she reads it, shocking everyone when Mafu suddenly collapses. Ishiki reassures everyone that Mafu is fine, revealing that Torich did a little trick when showing the participant the death cue card, revealing that when the cue card is flipped, it also spells out sleep. Since the participant would pretend to act out anything Torich wrote, the participant pretended to sleep, and due to the noise-canceling headphones, the participant didn't know how severe his acting was. It wasn't until the show was canceled that Torich used the chaos to secretly inject the poison, explaining why Mafu's CPR had seemed to wake the participant up, only for the poison to finally take their lives. Refusing to accept such nonsense, Torich demands to know where the murder poison needle is, but Ishiki simply takes out Torich's thick double-sided marker, revealing that the thinner side of the marker concealed the poison needle. With Torich out of luck, he admits defeat, but reveals that the participant that he was working with threatened to reveal Torich's tricks. Out of nowhere, Kumo tosses Torich's marker, ordering him to stab himself. As Torich slowly raises the pen towards his face, Ishiki dashes forwards, prompting Torich to stab Ishiki with the pen. As Kumo and Torich snap out of it, Mafu and Ishiki admit that there is not enough time to save Ishiki, but luckily, earlier when Mafu had tripped, she had unknowingly grabbed one of Torich's regular markers, meaning Ishiki wasn't poisoned. As Kumo and Ishiki head elsewhere, Kumo apologizes for putting Ishiki through all of that, stating that he'll stop solving cases. That way, Ishiki won't have to constantly risk his life to mitigate Kumo's curse. Heading outside, Ishiki helps untangle a tangled-up Mafu, shocked to hear the reason Mafu is so committed to disproving psychics is because she once had a patient that refused normal medicine, believing that a psychic could heal them, but ended up passing due to said beliefs. Realizing something, Ishiki thanks Mafu for the inspiration, rushing off, but Mafu secretly wonders how Kumo was able to order Torich around. As Ishiki rushes to confront Kumo outside, Kumo reiterates how he doesn't want to put Ishiki's life at risk again, but Ishiki reminds Kumo that he's doing what he loves. Changing topics, Ishiki invites Kumo to watch a meteor shower with him on Nandan Island, a location famous for Kumo's favorite black sugar syrup. Several days later, Kumo and Ishiki ride a boat to their destination. Surprised that the boat driver, Takumi Jumanji, recognizes Ishiki, having heard that Ishiki is an acquaintance of Kawasemi. Getting suspicious, Kumo asks why a famous detective like Ishiki was invited to this meteor shower, learning that there was an incident that happened a long time ago, but before Jumanji can divulge what happened, Kumo blocks his ears, not wanting to be a detective anymore. With Jumanji reassuring Ishiki that everything will be fine, they make it onto the island, where Jumanji gives Kumo and Ishiki a tour, telling them about the luscious sugarcane that farmers across the world visit to harvest. As Jumanji reveals that it'll just be the observatory staff and the guests, Kumo gets excited being so close to the sugarcanes that yield the black sugar syrup. But Ishiki gets more annoyed hearing that Kumo wants to try hula hooping on the island. With Jumanji happy to see Ishiki and Kumo bicker, he states that he'll request that their chefs tonight add black sugar syrup to their meals, ultimately heading to the Nandan Observatory. Upon entering the observatory, they make note of the lobby and cafeteria on the first floor, but find it weird that there is a pistol being displayed. Jumanji states that the pistol is a replica meant to ward off evil spirits, as it was traditional to keep flintlocks as a charm to protect one's sugarcane. Heading to the second floor, Jumanji states the guests will be staying on the second floor, leading them to the door that opens to the observation dome. But upon opening the door, the three hear a massive cry. With the sound of the voice revealed to be Uno the chef, Uno acknowledges Jumanji as the director, apologizing as she was simply relieving her stress in the soundproofed room. Uno tells the director about Donzawa, the guest bossing her around for getting his order incorrect, but gets more pissed hearing that another guest wants her to add black sugar syrup to her menu. As Uno realizes that Kamo and Ishiki are guests themselves, she apologizes for not being more professional, all of a sudden spotting Donzawa enter the room. Immediately, Ishiki gets weirded out by Donzawa's peculiar haircut. Learning that Donzawa had cut his hair to be able to look through a telescope, but seeing the other guest, Donzawa calls everyone impure. Butting in, Onodera introduces herself as a photographer, stating that Donzawa is simply disappointed that people who won't appreciate the meteor shower are here. Onodera does mention another guest present, prompting John Grizzly to enter, someone Kumo recognizes as Blue Academy closed circle theory instructor and one of the only people Kumo respected. When John asks why Kumo is here, Kumo states he's simply here on holiday, prompting the director to state that all the guests are here, making Kumo wonder why such a high-class detective like John is present. When Onodera offers to tell everyone about the horrible incident that occurred several years ago, Kumo states that he doesn't want to hear it, but gives in, blaming Ishiki for convincing him. Taking over, John recounts that 10 years ago, the conditions for the Leonid meteor shower were perfect, but sadly 6 individuals along with the director at the time were all gunned down, something that surprises Kumo. The current director admits that his father was the director 10 years ago, and that the gun was never found nor was the killer identified. Jumanji states that he wanted to honor his father's last wish to hold another viewing party, something that the guests praised Jumanji for doing. But out of nowhere, a girl interrupts. Apologizing for Jumanji's tragic past, the voice introduces herself as the idol of constellation Orion, Oriheim, with Ishiki completely infatuated by Oriheim's beauty. But out of nowhere, the dome begins to open, revealed to be Kamo, who is simply messing around. As the massive telescope spins, Jumanji reveals that a computer automatically moves the telescope to the nearest stars, but Ishiki learns that they won't be viewing the meteor shower through the massive telescope, as viewing it with their eyes will be far more enjoyable. Jumanji states that they'll be viewing the meteor shower on the roof at 11 p.m., asking everyone to head to the buffet, but Uno and Ishiki can't help but notice Kamo has doused all his food with black sugar syrup. Donzawa and Onodera reveal that Kamo is actually quite well informed when it comes to astronomy, not even surprised that it's one of Kamo's hidden skills. Just then, Ishiki wonders how much John knows about Kamo's curse, heading over to chat with John. Making some small talk, Ishiki reassures John that Kamo isn't doing any detective work, but asks to know more about the incident that led to Kamo's expulsion. John states that 5 years ago, as part of an exam, students worked with police to solve cases. Since Kamo was quite skilled, he managed to track down the base of 7 killers. But when the police raided the location, Kamo was found alongside the 7 murderers that had been killed. The incident was deemed the bloody training incident, but since Kamo couldn't remember what had transpired during the mission, Kamo was forbidden from obtaining his detective license, something John disagreed with as he would have sentenced Kamo to death. Out of nowhere, Kamo suddenly begins hula hooping, forcing Ishiki to order him to stop before Kamo throws up, but having had enough fun, Kamo states he'll be heading to bed. Several hours pass, and the Leonid meteor shower finally commences, captivating everyone's eyes, but Ishiki wonders where Onodera is, having been absent for 2 hours now. Just then, the dome begins to open and a gunshot can be heard, prompting everyone to run towards the observatory room, where they realize the door is locked. With the help of everyone, they manage to barge the door open, but with the lights not working, Uno rushes to get a flashlight. Upon shining the light around the room, everyone is horrified to see Onodera shot and Kamo laying beside her. With Kamo stating that he doesn't remember what happened, everyone begins crying for Kamo to be restrained, but John roars for everyone to freeze as he needs to analyze the situation. With Kamo putting his faith in John and Ishiki, John examines Onodera's corpse. noting how her body is still warm with a gunshot wound perfectly through her heart. As John holds onto the gun, he notes that all the lights in the room have been shattered and that there is no possible way to escape through the dome, the vents, or any hidden passage. With his observations, John states that the killer can only be Kamo, but when Kamo tries to point out that someone must have locked the door, he's surprised to see that there is a set of master keys lying beside him. With no other choice, John orders Ishiki to arrest Kamo, which Kamo doesn't disagree with. As people fetch Kamo's shoes, John orders Jumanji to call the police on the mainland, cutting to a room where Ishiki asks if Kamo reckons it's the same bloody incident from 5 years ago. Kamo admits that everything feels all too familiar, shaking as he believes he truly did shoot Onodera. But Ishiki reminds Kamo that they shouldn't operate on pure speculation and that Kamo would never harm the innocent. Realizing something, Kamo reveals that he's never been good with a gun, meaning it must be someone else that framed Kamo, since Onodera's gunshot wound was perfectly through her heart. With Kamo chained inside the room, Ishiki rushes outside, allowing Kamo to relax a bit, admitting that he had panicked 5 years ago, but is relieved to have Ishiki to put his faith in. As a storm begins to brew on the island, Jumanji gets notified that police won't be able to make it to the island until the morning, but at the same time Ishiki is seen in the observatory dome room. Ishiki is sad that he couldn't find any hidden escape paths, but upon inspecting the shattered lights, he realizes that they've all been precisely broken with a single bullet, right down the middle. Knowing that Kamo couldn't possibly perform such a feat, Ishiki kneels next to Onodera, praying for her, only to realize that the computer in the room must have some sort of recording when the dome opened and there were gunshots. As Ishiki stumbles onto several files, someone sneaks up behind him, but when Ishiki turns around, John apologizes, having thought Ishiki was the criminal. John states that he's brought a ladder to further inspect the dome, dead set on gathering evidence against Kamo, but John knows Ishiki still wants to prove Kamo as innocent. John states that he's already interviewed everyone, informing Ishiki that Onodera had disappeared around 11 p.m. to get her camera equipment, but John notes how weird it was for her not to have it set up earlier. Additionally, it's apparent that it was 1 a.m. when Onodera was shot. John reveals that Jumanji had visited his office around 11:30 p.m. but had returned by midnight. Donzawa had gone to the bathroom at midnight, but had returned before 1 a.m. when the gunshot was heard. Ono was in the kitchen from 11 p.m. to 1 a.m., but was with Oriheim when the gunshot was heard, and Oriheim was live streaming up until 12:40 a.m. when she headed to the kitchen to chat with Ono. Since John and Ishiki remained on the rooftop the entire night, it makes Kamo the only possible suspect, having gone to bed at 10:40 p.m. With Ishiki at a loss for words, Ishiki states that he refuses to accept Kamo as the criminal, disappointing John, as Ishiki is acting out of pure emotions. John wonders what Ishiki and Kamo's relationship is, surprised to hear that Ishiki and Kamo are friends, revealing that Kamo used to never allow anyone to get close to him and only strive for logical perfection. Changing topics, John asks if Ishiki found anything, prompting Ishiki to reveal how the lights were shot and that the telescope did indeed record something, but it only shows the inside of the closed dome up until when the dome opened towards the North Star and a gunshot can be heard. Evaluating all the evidence, John suddenly realizes something, handing Ishiki a key to uncuff Kamo, as John knows Kamo isn't the real culprit. John warns Ishiki to act fast, as something similar to the mass killing may occur, but cutting to Kamo, Kamo praises Ishiki for clearing his name. When Ishiki asks to know what John had deduced, Kamo reveals that it would have been impossible to shoot down the lights in a pitch-dark room, meaning the lights were either shot before 11 p.m. or after 1 a.m. Since everyone had discovered the dark room at 1 a.m., it means that the lights were shot before 11 p.m. Additionally, Kamo didn't have shoes on, and Kamo and Onodera's bodies were on opposite sides of the telescope, meaning it would have been impossible for Kamo to shoot Onodera given his circumstances. As Kamo prepares to leave the room, Kamo reveals that his brain is still sleepy, as he had been drugged, hence he went to bed early. When Ishiki accuses Ono of such an act, Kamo is clearly more interested in consuming more black sugar syrup, all whilst John stumbles onto some fishing line tied to the telescope. With Kamo and Ishiki back in Kamo's room, Kamo states that the criminal must have carried Kamo out of his room, but upon seeing that there are no clues left behind, Kamo deduces that it must have been a targeted attack. When Ishiki mentions how John wanted to apologize later, Kamo mentions how John's admirable personality is what Kamo respects about John. But out of nowhere, both Ishiki and Kamo suddenly spot John fall past their bedroom window. As Kamo and Ishiki rush to the bottom floor, John cries that everything is a trap, but when Kamo and Ishiki reach John's body, Kamo declares that John is dead. Getting serious, Kamo states that for a blue instructor like John to be killed, it must mean that the criminal is quite skilled and dangerous. Laying beside John's corpse, Kamo declares he'll get revenge, noting how there were no signs of a struggle, but spots John grasping onto some fishing line. At the same time, Jumanji and Donzawa arrive, shocked to see John is dead, but wonders what Kamo is here. With Ishiki reassuring everyone that Kamo is innocent, Ishiki gathers everyone up, revealing the same gun John had held on to was used to murder John. Going over everyone's alibis, Ishiki states that Jumanji was in his office when John was shot, Donzawa was in the first floor restroom, Ono was fast asleep, and Orihime was live streaming. With everyone seemingly panicking at the thought that they've all been cursed, Kamo speaks up, completely pissed that the culprit has the balls to blend in and act innocent. As Ishiki and Kamo go over the crime scene once more, Ishiki reenacts how Ishiki and the others barged open the locked door. But Kamo asks Ishiki how he thinks the criminal had locked the door from the outside when Kamo had the only master key and was locked inside. Ishiki states that he believes the criminal must have used the fishing line to lock the door from the outside, but Kamo sadly reveals that the gaps of the door had been sealed with adhesive, meaning the criminal is more formidable than Kamo had initially thought. When Ishiki goes on to explain what transpired next, Kamo heads over to Onodera's corpse, spotting the vent in his line of sight, but it seems to be sealed shut. As Kamo asks Ishiki to help turn off all the lights, Ishiki manages to adjust his eyes to the darkness, spotting the switch for the room lights along with the open and closed switch for the dome. With Kamo realizing something, Ishiki begins to break down, fearing that the culprit will get away, but as Ishiki turns on the lights, he gets annoyed that Kamo has begun hula hooping. Kamo mentions how the fishing line got caught on his hula hoop, but when Ishiki still doesn't get it, Kamo declares that they've already solved the case. All that's left is to find the culprit. With Kamo tossing his hoop over Ishiki, Orihime suddenly appears, catching the hula hoop, only to ask if Ishiki had any more flashlights. Orihime mentions how Ono is quite annoyed at everyone asking her for flashlights, but with that final clue, Kamo declares that he now has all the pieces to catch the criminal. As Ishiki begins assessing the situation, he gathers everyone in the observatory dome, apologizing for the sudden meeting as he declares the murderer is indeed amongst them. Starting off, Ishiki recounts how there was another gunshot sound, followed by the death of John. Ishiki reveals that since the gunshot sound came from the rooftop, the murderer had intended for people to rush to the rooftop, but since Kamo and Ishiki saw John through their window, they managed to find John's body first. Ishiki reveals that the murderer must have been on the rooftop with John whilst it was still raining. Therefore, when they came to check on John's body, they purposely didn't bring an umbrella to conceal the fact that they were outside prior. With Ishiki declaring Jumanji as the murderer, Jumanji calmly expresses that he followed everyone outside out of shock, but upon seeing Kamo's cold glare, Jumanji reminds Ishiki that he was on the roof with everyone at the time of Onodera's death. Firing back, Ishiki reveals that he already knows Jumanji's trick, having snuck off before the incident. Jumanji had put Onodera to sleep, dragging her into the observatory alongside Kamo. With all the lights already shattered, Jumanji had planted Kamo with the master key and the gun, only to lock and glue the doors shut from the outside. When the others wonder how Jumanji locked the doors without the key, Ishiki reveals that Jumanji had given Onodera less of the sleeping drug, allowing her to wake up after he glued the door. Since Onodera was still drowsy, she naturally wanted to turn on the lights, but when the lights didn't turn on, Onodera headed towards the door, accidentally locking the door from the inside. Even if Ishiki can explain the locked door, the others still want to know how Onodera was then murdered, prompting Ishiki to reveal that Jumanji used another trick. Showing off the fishing line John left behind, Ishiki reveals that the fishing line was tied to the telescope and a gun hidden in the vents. This way, when Onodera and 2 opened the dome for some moonlight, the telescope would rotate and naturally pull the trigger. Since the gun was aimed at the light switch, Onodera was shot, having stood in front of the switch. When Jumanji tries to point out that there couldn't have been a gun in the vent since there was already one next to Kamo, Ishiki reveals that the gun next to Kamo and the one John confiscated was the replica gun, whereas the gun in the vent was retrieved by Jumanji shortly after they entered the room and ultimately used to murder John. Smirking, Jumanji demands to know why he would murder people, but Ishiki reveals that before they barged open the door, Jumanji had requested flashlights, concluding that Jumanji knew the room would be dark before they even entered. Completely caught, Jumanji reveals that he killed Onodera because she was here to learn more about the murder that happened 10 years ago, revealed to be a journalist in disguise. Jumanji cries that it was Onodera's fault for snooping around, but Kamo deduces that Jumanji wanted to hide his gun from her, the same gun used in the accident 10 years ago. Jumanji reveals that his father was the one that shot all the guests 10 years ago, only to take his own life, but when Jumanji found that out, he swore to hide that secret forever. With Jumanji blaming Onodera and John for trying to catch him, Kamo suddenly orders Jumanji to shoot himself, but before Jumanji can, Ishiki knocks the gun out of Kamo's hand. Sadly, Jumanji had used this chance to slip a pill into his mouth, but Kamo demands to know why he's being targeted. With Jumanji uttering that a mysterious person has been pulling all the strings from the shadows, Jumanji begins to foam from the mouth, whispering the phrase, "Night turns to dawn only to pass away." As the sun rises, Ishiki notifies everyone that the police will be arriving soon. But Kamo is left alone with Jumanji's corpse, curious as to who this mastermind is, having set up everything and invited Kamo onto the island, with the intention of framing Kamo for murder in front of a blue instructor John. Remembering Jumanji's cryptic, "Night turns to dawn" words, Kamo heads to open the dome, suddenly noticing something, but just then Ishiki arrives with the police. As the police secure the body, a mysterious policeman suddenly appears, only to cut over to Ishiki, who thanks Orihime for giving her statement, getting flustered by her beauty. With the police leaving with all the bodies, Kamo states he's upset John is no longer with them, having been one of the people that Kamo could have trusted. Bringing up the bloody training incident, Kamo shows Ishiki a picture of the crime scene, realizing that Onodera's blood resembles the marking on Kamo's neck. Kamo notes how the blood training incident was the only one in history with such strange circumstances, and it was also the first time Kamo obtained the curse, meaning there is a mastermind that has been toying with Kamo for the past 5 years. Back on the boat, the lone suspicious policeman stands guard over the body, signaling for Jumanji to reveal that he had faked his death. Jumanji thanks the policeman for helping with the murder of Onodera and faking his death, amazed that the legendary House of M, geniuses of the criminal underworld, would help out. When Jumanji begins rambling on about how genius Kamo was with his deductions, the policeman silences Jumanji with a bullet through the skull, only to follow up by peeling off his mask, only for the mysterious man to make a phone call to his brother. Elsewhere, another mysterious man picks up the call, happy to hear that his brother had met Kamo for the first time, amused to hear that Kamo turned pale upon seeing the mark they left at the crime scene. The brothers mention how Kamo is the 6th generation of an enemy from their family, along with the 9th generation for a certain other family, revealing that Kamo has the blood for the great detective Sherlock Holmes and the blood from the mastermind James Moriarty. Back on the island, Kamo seems to have a change in mood, now hula hooping to relieve his stress. Kamo asks Ishiki if he'll continue to work with him, satisfied to hear that Ishiki won't stop being by Kamo's side, rewarding Ishiki with a jug of black sugar syrup. With Kamo and Ishiki returning home, Ishiki and Kamo begin cleaning Kamo's padded floor, but Kamo notices Ishiki is upset. Ishiki asks if Kamo is different since coming back from the observatory, wondering why Kamo thinks the boat that carried the bodies from the observatory was sunk by the mastermind, but Kamo reiterates that the mastermind is simply tying up all the loose ends. Regardless, Ishiki is concerned at how relaxed Kamo is, but Kamo states that they would be wasting time thinking about the mastermind, leading Ishiki to realize Kamo's cat is fast asleep under the floor padding. Kamo brings out a gift for Amamiya, asking Ishiki to deliver it to her. But when Ishiki clocks in and hands Amamiya the gift, Amamiya neglects the gift, informing Ishiki that she has a job for him. With no other details, Ishiki heads to conference room 3, greeting a blonde lady that gets excited seeing Ishiki. Introducing herself as Monkey Chikori from Lime Weekly, Monkey hands Ishiki her business card, revealing that she's here to spend the day with Ishiki in order to write about him in their upcoming issue for people to watch. Surprised, Ishiki mentions how Lime Weekly normally covers athletes and entertainers, but Monkey states that since Ishiki is the genius detective that solved so many murders, Monkey would be honored to write about Ishiki. Just then, Ishiki realizes that most of his cases weren't reported on the news, but Monkey reveals that she has a fascination with detectives. Monkey states that she was kidnapped when she was younger, and it was ultimately a detective that saved her, explaining that she's been obsessed with detectives all her life, even becoming a reporter just so she can learn more about them. Seeing how infatuated Monkey is with detectives, Ishiki hesitates to tell her it's truly Kamo solving the cases, uttering that he's currently not working on any big cases at the moment. With Monkey excited to follow Ishiki around, they both head out, but Ishiki feels bad for Monkey since most of his job involves piles of paperwork. Stopping at a nearby cafe, they both head in for some tea and coffee, leading Monkey to order some hot cocoa and Ishiki some iced black coffee. Upon looking up at the employee, Ishiki is shocked to see Kamo as the cashier, asking to have a quick chat with Kamo privately. Ishiki demands to know why Kamo is taking random part-time jobs, but Kamo reminds Ishiki that they haven't received a case in ages. Peeping at Monkey, Kamo asks if Ishiki is on a date with a reporter, surprising Ishiki as he asks how Kamo knows Monkey is a reporter. Kamo simply states that Monkey glanced at the magazine racks upon entering the store, plus Monkey has comfortable shoes for running along with business cards stuffed in her phone case. As Ishiki reassures Kamo that he's simply hanging out with Monkey for work, 3 female customers enter the store, all amazed by the fancy-looking building. One of the ladies says she'll take a picture of the store sign first, prompting the 2 other ladies to order 3 lattes. But first, Kamo gives Ishiki and Monkey their cocoa and black drinks. Seeing his drink, Ishiki suspects Kamo simply gave him black sugar syrup, annoyed as he demands to know if Kamo is truly working at the cafe. Smirking, Kamo proceeds to masterfully craft 3 platypus lattes. But sadly, one of the ladies mistakes the platypus drawing as a duck. With Ishiki laughing at Kamo's terrible latte drawing, Monkey suddenly takes a picture of Ishiki and Kamo together, explaining to Kamo that she is writing an article about Ishiki's detective work, but Kamo is clearly shaken, realizing Monkey is a crime reporter. Serving Monkey and Ishiki a massive latte. Ishiki clearly gets annoyed seeing how weird Kamo is acting, but Kamo reveals that crime reporters are very useful to detectives, therefore they need to build a good relationship with Monkey. When Kamo tries to butter Monkey up, Monkey cries for Kamo to stop wasting Ishiki's time, pleasing Kamo as Monkey clearly respects Ishiki highly. Out of nowhere, one of the girls suddenly collapses, prompting the other girls to cry her name Julie. Rushing over to inspect Julie, Kamo orders Ishiki to call the ambulance and police, deducing that Julie has been poisoned. As the police block off and secure the crime scene, the police report to Ishiki that a cyanide capsule was found in the women's cup, but at the same time Kamo is seen promising to avenge Julie. Out of nowhere, Monkey orders Kamo to clear the scene, stating that the great detective Ishiki needs room to solve the case. Happy to see Monkey speak so highly of Ishiki, Kamo utters that only 3 people could be the possible murderers, these being Kamo himself and the 2 ladies. With Monkey declaring that Ishiki will solve the case, Monkey pulls Ishiki aside, asking Ishiki about his thoughts on other complex and famous cases. But Kamo takes the chance to suggest that Monkey should begin bringing cases to Ishiki first, something Ishiki knows is really to benefit Kamo. Having gathered the 3 suspects, Ishiki asks Kamo what he was doing during the crime. But Kamo simply brings up the fact that he was annoyed seeing one of the ladies mistaken his platypus art as a duck. Moving on, Ishiki asks the lady who mistook Kamo's art, "Hey Ami, what she did after carrying the lattes to the others. Hayami states that as soon as she arrived at the table, Julie had asked the girls to gather for some pics. But soon after, Hayami had to take a phone call with the manager of her part-time job. Hayami admits that the phone call wasn't long, and that Julie was the first to select a latte. But Kamo wonders what Tameda was doing. Monkey butts in, asking Kamo to allow Ishiki to do the talking. But speaking up, Tameda reveals that Julie had purposely selected the cup furthest away from herself, shocking Kamo and Ishiki as they wonder how the murderer knew Julie would select the random cup. With Ishiki asking Hayami and Tameda to give him time to think, Ishiki wonders how they can inspect the lattes, but Kamo suggests Ishiki check Monkey's phone and Julie's social media to see if they have any photos before the crime. Asking Monkey for her photos, Monkey shows off the photos she snapped, impressing Kamo as he notes his platypus latte truly is beautiful. Next, Ishiki scans Julie's social media, landing on a photo of Julie holding up her latte. But suddenly Kamo realizes something. As Kamo heads off to retrieve something, Ishiki racks his brain for any solution, but Monkey is surprised to see Ishiki struggling so much. Returning, Kamo shows off a massive hand towel with their cafe logo, declaring that he's solved the case. With Monkey weirded out, Kamo heads out back, prompting Ishiki to ask Monkey to hide any blades in the cafe, fearing that Kamo's curse will harm the murderer. That evening, Ishiki gathers everyone once more, declaring that Julie was indeed murdered. When Tameda wonders how the murder got Julie to select the random latte, Ishiki reveals that Julie had a tendency to do things that drew attention to herself. An example is of Julie being in the center of all her pictures. Hayami mentions how the lattes were exactly the same though, but Ishiki reveals that the culprit only needed to change the lattes slightly, showing Julie's last photo. Glaring at Hayami, Ishiki asks if Hayami knows why 2 of the lattes had misshapen eyes of the platypus drawings, prompting Hayami to cry out in defeat. Collapsing to the ground, Hayami screams that when she got a job at a talent agency, Julie took the chance to steal her boyfriend. As Ishiki scolds Hayami for her demented way of thinking, Kamo suddenly orders Hayami to bash her own head, forcing Hayami to mindlessly walk towards a large teapot. Rushing towards Hayami, Ishiki manages to knock Hayami down with a bag of coffee beans. But as Kamo thanks Ishiki for saving her, Monkey is seen smirking. With the case wrapped up, Ishiki apologizes for the mess today, but Monkey states that she saw a true detective in Ishiki today, hoping to follow Ishiki around more in the future. As Kamo serves some lattes to celebrate Ishiki and Monkey's new friendship, Ishiki scolds Kamo for acting weird, but their interaction makes Monkey giggle. Cutting to the Eastern Japan General Hospital, we see Mafu inform Kamo that his curse isn't a genetic thing. Therefore, Mafu suggests that Kamo undergo some tests to help uncover the curse's secrets. Back with Ishiki, we see Amamiya order Ishiki to head to Aichi, but when Ishiki wonders why, Amamiya mentions Sawasemi is currently at Aichi. Amamiya reveals that since Yamane was arrested, Sawasemi's arrest rate has decreased drastically. But when Ishiki wonders if Amamiya truly cares about Sawasemi, Ishiki realizes that Amamiya simply wants Ishiki to guarantee she won't have any competition for her superintendent title. As Ishiki travels to Aichi by train, Ishiki wonders why Kamo is tagging along, but Kamo mentions how if Sawasemi is failing to solve some cases, maybe Kamo can snatch them from Sawasemi. Ishiki asks if Kamo is worried about Sawasemi as well, but leads Kamo to begin digging deep, reminding Ishiki that he didn't care for anyone else in the past. Ishiki suddenly remembers that John Grizzly had told Ishiki that Kamo was the ideal detective with no flaws since he had no friends. But taking the chance, Ishiki asks Kamo if he has any friends, shocked to hear Kamo truly didn't have any friends. Thinking for a moment, Kamo says Ishiki is his first friend, relieving Ishiki as he's happy that Kamo is slowly changing. Arriving at Nagoya Station, Kamo stops at the station, stating that he'll meet up with Ishiki at Aichi Station, hinting that he has some business to attend to. With Ishiki heading to his assigned station, he begins heading out in search of Sawasemi, but suddenly hears Sawasemi scolding an officer for not being clean-shaven. The officer reveals that he's undercover, prompting Sawasemi to apologize as he learns that another on-duty officer, Kimi, will be collaborating with the undercover officer. When Sawasama demands to know who Kimyu is, Kimyu apologizes for the late introduction, scanning Kimyu's badge, learning Kimyu Kimiyasu is a constable. Realizing that he's overstepping, Sawasama suddenly spots Ashiki, both heading to grab some lunch. As Ashiki munches on some udon, Sawasama deduces that Ashiki is here because Amamiya wants to see how far Sawasama has fallen, surprising Ashiki as Sawasama knows Amamiya quite well. Sawasama admits that he's lost his touch, but even though Sawasama doesn't care what the higher-ups say, he's still motivated to solve crimes. But for some reason, Sawasama can't see things like he used to. When Ashiki tries to comfort Sawasama recommends Ashiki buy some souvenirs, both heading to a nearby supermarket. As Ashiki finishes up shopping, he suddenly spots a sign warning people of a mad chameleon. A random attacker Sawasama knows targets students during the open, attacking them with a wrench, only to steal the victims' phones. Ashiki finds it weird that the chameleon only steals phones, leading Sawasama to reveal that evidence has led to the same perpetrator, but the attacker has the ability to disguise themselves, hence the name chameleon. Sawasama states that the attacker was seen as a boy, a man, a woman, and many more, but just then they both spot a businessman attacked by an attacker with a wrench. As the attacker steals the man's phone, Sawasama orders Ashiki to chase after the attacker whilst he calls the ambulance, leading Ashiki to tail after the attacker. Sadly, the attacker had pushed over a lady, distracting Ashiki long enough to disappear into a nearby clothing shop. Returning to Sawasama, Ashiki reports that he has gathered everyone in the clothing store the attacker disappeared into, but sadly none of them are wearing the same outfit as the attacker at the time. Sawasama praises the attacker, since they probably hid their clothing in the clothing store, but worst of all, Sawasama reveals that the businessman was actually a student and has been pronounced dead. Getting serious, Sawasama asks if Ashiki is sure he's gathered the possible suspects, learning that Ashiki confirmed that there was no way to escape due to the blocked-off exit and heavily guarded entrance. Seeing as the attacker performed the exact actions as the mad chameleon, Sawasama declares that he'll finally catch the chameleon, pointing his tweezers at the youngest suspect, only to hesitate changing targets. But after a while of thinking, Sawasama admits that he can't deduce who the attacker is. Just then, Kamo calls Ashiki, asking if Ashiki had met up with Sawasama yet, learning that Ashiki is currently tangled up in an interesting murder case. Kamo perks up hearing that the chameleon can change what they look like, asking Ashiki to wait as he heads to where Ashiki is. In the meantime, a police officer reports that security cameras around the store couldn't see the culprit's face, but Sawasama knows that the attacker must be at least 170 centimeters tall to be able to attack the businessman of a similar height. Able to narrow down the suspects, Sawasama once again tries to search for something, but upon failing, agrees to let the suspects go for now, having taken down the information already. With Sawasama apologizing to Ashiki for not performing like his usual self, Kamo suddenly arrives, but has been arrested for acting so suspiciously. Greeting Kamo, Sawasama asks for Kamo's help, reassuring Ashiki that he already knows Kamo is the true detective. Kamo first asks why the student was in a suit, learning that the student was probably out job hunting, normal since 2 previous victims were a mock exam supervisor and a part-time office worker. Kamo realizes that all the victims were wearing suits, deducing that since the attacker's appearance changes every time, it must mean that all the victims are lying. When Ashiki demands to know why the victims would lie after being attacked, Kamo suggests that they feel guilty being involved in a scam, something Sawasama knows as It's Me scam. Sawasama explains that the victims must have dressed up in suits and participated in scamming random elderly, but the students fear if the culprit is caught, their scam will be exposed as well, meaning the attacker and victims are all connected by this scam. Kamo deduces that there is some power struggle within the scam, explaining why the attacker only steals the victims' phones, as the attacker prevents the culprit from notifying the others. With Sawasama amazed by Kamo's deduction, Kamo mentions how Sawasama would have easily figured this all out in the past, but Sawasama admits he's not his usual self. Having seen enough, Kamo declares that Sawasama hasn't been sleeping nor eating enough, prompting Sawasama to declare that he's been working hard to ensure that no one else is pressured like Yamane. At that moment, Kamo states that Sawasama is simply suppressing his true self, allowing Sawasemi to slowly pick apart Kumo's unorganized outfit. But Ishiki realizes that Sawasemi is slowly returning to his usual self. With Kumo happy to see Sawasemi is still sharp, Kumo orders Sawasemi to solve the case, giving Sawasemi enough information to figure out who the attacker was. Turning to Ishiki, Sawasemi asks if the attacker had shoved the lady when he was escaping. But when Ishiki says he wasn't, Sawasemi deduces that the attacker was most likely checking his watch hoping to make it past a restricted area. But sadly the path had already closed. Sawasemi concludes that the attacker's malfunctioned watch led them astray and was forced into the clothing store, and that among the suspects there was only one with a malfunctioned watch. Sadly, when Sawasemi asks for the suspect's contact details, the police realize the details are all fake. But Sawasemi knows the attacker will return for his belongings he hid in the store, including the victim's smartphone. As police officers manage to locate the attacker's clothing in the store, Ishiki and Sawasemi rack their brains to locate the victim's phone, but just then Kumo declares that the phone is in plain sight. With Sawasemi catching on to what Kumo is saying, we cut to later that night when the attacker has returned for the phone, reaching out to a mannequin that is holding a phone. Just then, several policemen swarm the attacker, prompting Sawasemi to officially arrest the mad chameleon. As Kimyu arrives to help with the arrest, Sawasemi suddenly feels something's off but proceeds to slightly adjust Kimyu's necktie. Cutting to Ishiki, he informs Kumo that Sawasemi had captured the chameleon, asking what Kumo was doing at Nagoya Station earlier. Kumo reveals that Mafu had recommended a clinic to dig into Kumo's curse, announcing that there may be a way to cure Kumo's curse. As Ishiki celebrates the good news, Kumo ignores Ishiki, glaring off into the distance. Having returned back to his usual routine, Ishiki suddenly gets a call from Kumo, asking if Ishiki would like to help Spitz find his missing family. Seeing as Spitz had been helping them out, Ishiki reasons that they should return the favor, suddenly spotting a frail-looking Spitz. As the two make their way over to Kumo's apartment, they're both surprised to see Kumo has decorated the place, hoping to welcome more clients in the future. Deeming Spitz their first client, the three sit down, but Ishiki wonders why Fitz looks so distracted. Kumo reveals that he's offered to look for Spitz's missing family, but in exchange Spitz must obtain blue files on the bloody training incident. Kumo does mention how he obtained a copy of the original report files, but some sections from the report seem to be missing, but Ishiki is more curious as to how Kumo got a copy. With Kumo brushing off Ishiki's question, Kumo states that Blue should have the original unedited version, asking Spitz to steal that version, but Ishiki wonders if Kumo can prove his innocence after seeing the files. Kumo reveals that Mafu suspects Kumo's curse may have been caused by medical intervention, leading Kumo to believe that during the 3 hours that he blacked out, something must have occurred, and coincidentally Kumo's copy of the files seemed to have missing details during the 3-hour slot as well. With Kumo reminding Spitz that he'll only help find Spitz's family in exchange for the real files, Ishiki scolds Kumo for being so selfish, reminding Kumo that Spitz is now an integral friend of theirs. Breaking into tears, Spitz thanks Ishiki for the kind words, agreeing to Kumo's conditions, and in exchange Kumo searches for Spitz's older brother. With an agreement made, Kumo declares that they'll first head over to Imanashi, leading Spitz to explain his older brother was an ethnologist, someone who studied folk beliefs. Spitz says they're currently heading to the village of Yadamura, a location Spitz's brother would visit often, but 11 years ago, out of nowhere, he disappeared over the summer while Spitz was with him. Out of nowhere, Ishiki spots a white snake, but hearing some roaring sound, Kumo rushes through some bushes, discovering a gorgeous waterfall. Spotting a lady standing up on some rocks, our trio notice a Hokora folk shrine, but at the same time a sudden axe comes flying towards Ishiki, barely missing his head. Having spotted our trio, the lady flees, but out of nowhere several men approach the gang, warning them to be careful, only to disappear with the axe. As Kumo makes note of the men, the gang finally make it to a hill overlooking Yadamura village. But as the three approach a bridge, they spot a crowd of people arguing over some disappearances. Stepping up, Spitz greets the mayor, who recognizes Spitz, apologizing to our trio as the mayor mentions how the construction of a dam requires the entire village to evacuate. Butting in, A construction representative asks that the mayor simply give up his land, but the villagers cry that Yatagami will punish all evil. Ishiki learns that Yatagami is a night snake deity that has been protecting their village for years, suddenly meeting Muroi, who is an ethnologist visiting the village to study the Yatagami. As the villagers continue to hound the construction representative about their god, the mayor tries calming everyone down, suggesting that they let the representative simply survey their village. Hearing the villager ignore the mayor's suggestions, the representative scolds the mayor for not teaching his citizens manners, declaring that they'll start construction tomorrow. With the mayor ordering everyone to return home, Spitz asks what the mayor thinks of the situation, but the mayor admits that it's ultimately their country's final decision. Changing topics, the mayor asks if the gang are staying the night, offering to house them in his home since the representative is staying in the guest hut. As rain begins to pour down on the village, the trio manage to make it to the mayor's home safely, but out of nowhere the lady from before appears. Recognizing her as Mi, Spitz mentions how Mi is the mayor's granddaughter, but as the two act chummy, Kamo observes from the sidelines. That night over dinner, Spitz shows Kamo a picture of his brother, uttering that they were looking into the legend of Yatagami before the incident. When Spitz and his brother went to sleep in the guest hut across the river, Spitz woke up to the realization that his brother had gone missing, and ultimately the police nor the villagers could find him. With Ishiki freaked out by the disappearance, Spitz suddenly asks if he could try Kamo's black sugar syrup concoctions, but Ishiki takes the chance to admire the view of the river from their room, especially now since the rain has stopped. With Ishiki glancing at the guest hut across from them, Ishiki suddenly spots something terrifying, all three spotting a giant snake wrapped around someone. As the trio rush towards the guest hut, Kamo notices there are no footprints outside the muddy guest hut, all three rushing into the hut. Suddenly hearing a sound, the trio split up to search the hut, but failed to find anything. The next morning, police are called upon to discover the corpse of the construction representative at the bottom of the waterfall, with unusual snake scale markings around his neck. Inspecting the body, Ishiki receives a report the victim was most likely passed due to falling from the waterfall, but the marks of the victim's neck is still strange. Just then the mayor arrives, warning everyone that this must have been the work of the Yatagami. But Ishiki reminds the mayor that there were no prints around the muddy hut, but the mayor brushes that off as the god's doing. Swiftly hopping over some rocks, Mi asks why the mayor has allowed outsiders into the sacred waterfall, but the mayor states that our trio have come to investigate the murder. Kamo takes the chance to ask why Mi was near the waterfall yesterday, learning that Mi was giving Yatagami an offering in the shrine, something the villagers do often. When Kamo asks if they truly believe that Yatagami exists, Mi suddenly cries that the god does exist, but after thinking for a while, the mayor joins in, asking the other villagers if they think so too. With Ishiki shocked at the appearance of the villagers, Kamo suggests that they leave for now, strolling through the forest as Kamo reasons that a crowd like that will only harm them. As Kamo wonders what's making the villagers so passionate, Muroi suddenly appears from the bushes, asking if the detective trio truly believe that Yatagami killed the representative. Muroi mentions how Yatagami has the ability to make things disappear, stating that 15 years ago, a similar construction project was scheduled, but out of nowhere all the machinery disappeared. Muroi sympathizes with Spitz's brother disappearing, revealing that Yatagami's power is strange, having fallen off the mountain, but had survived believing it was Yatagami's protection. Kamo asks what Muroi was doing yesterday, learning that Muroi visited Yatagami's temple yesterday, a place that houses the shed skiing of a massive snake along with various manuscripts. Muroi reveals that the temple was unfortunately closed yesterday, so he was forced to return back to Suzuki's home where Muroi is staying. Now alone, the three go over the events last night, first spotting the body of a large snake, then that there were no prints around the muddy hut, and that the hut had barred windows protecting the hut. With Kamo stating that he has an idea of what happened, a policeman arrives guiding the three into the guest hut, leading Ishiki to wonder if the large noise they heard was because of a secret room. Unfortunately, the police reports the roof seems to have not been touched in ages, and that the tatama mats on the floor don't seem to be hiding anything. At the same time, Kamo discovers some of his black syrup that he spilled last night rushing over. But seeing as there are no leads, Spitz begins to believe that it truly was a god that took his brother. As Spitz reminisces on his memories with his brother, Spitz suddenly falls back, crying that he spotted a white snake in the river. With Kamo glancing through the windows, Kamo suddenly turns back to a suspicious-looking section of the floor, asking the officer where his spilled bottle of black syrup was when they got there. When the officer says that they haven't moved the spilled syrup except for when they replaced the tatama mats, Kamo declares that he has all the pieces to solve the case. As Ishiki gathers everyone, he explains that when they visited the guest hut, Kamo's sugar syrup seemed to have moved from the original spill, and that Spitz had spotted a snake in the river. Upon investigating, Ishiki found a rope tied to a rope, and using the fact that the temple was closed on the day of the crime, Ishiki states that the trick behind Yatagami's disappearance was the use of a painted scroll stuck to a tatama mat. Ishiki explains that a scroll of a person with a snake was attached to the bottom of tatama mat, and that it was strung up with one end of the rope hanging outside the window tied to a rock, and the other attached to the door. When the door is opened, the string would snap, sending the rock into the river, and ultimately laying the tatama mat back down, concealing the scroll. As for black syrup spilling everywhere, Ishiki deduces that the culprit snuck in after our trio left, only to retrieve the scroll. When Niroi wonders who would act out such a complicated scheme, Ishiki deduces that it was someone that wanted to protect the villagers, but they needed witnesses, prompting Ishiki to conclude that the mayor was behind everything. Ishiki first points out that the mayor, upon seeing the strangled victim, immediately declared the attack to be the work of Yatagami, but the mayor fires back, stating that these are only speculations, demanding to know where the murder weapon is. With Ishiki Shuken, Kamo steps up, revealing that the murder weapons must have been the thick ropes tied around the shrine, as they seem to be strung differently when they first visited. With Ishiki threatening to sample the rope for skin cells, the mayor ultimately gives in, revealing that he refused to allow his village to be turned into a dam, but Ishiki suspects the mayor is still hiding something. Out of nowhere, Kamo orders the mayor to jump to his death, but having prepared, Ishiki rushes to grab the mayor, snapping him out of the hypnosis. Sadly, the ground beneath Ishiki and the mayor crumbles, forcing Ishiki to catch the mayor and cling onto the edge of the cliff. As Kamo comes back, a mysterious man tosses a rope to save Ishiki and the mayor, ultimately handing the mayor over to the police. With me now left alone with our trio, Kamo breaks the silence by calling out to the man from earlier, revealed to be Spitz's brother. Spitz's brother asks how Kamo and Ishiki knew he was alive, leading Ishiki to explain that Muroi's story of his survival, along with me seen with an insulated bag, allowed them to deduce that Spitz's brother was living in the mountains. With Spitz's brother impressed by Spitz's friends, Spitz demands to know why his brother disappeared, leading the brother to explain that 15 years ago Spitz's brother had found out about the construction scheduling and that it was the mayor that hid all the construction machinery and pinned it on Yatagami. Spitz's brother also adds that 4 years after that, he had run into a dangerous organization that forced Spitz's brother into hiding without telling his family. Spitz's brother admits that he was the one that led the mayor into killing the representative, as the representative had discovered that Spitz's brother was hiding in the mountains, making outrageous demands, ultimately leading the mayor to killing him. Spitz's brother refuses to let any more suffer, asking Ishiki to arrest him, but Kamo wonders if the mayor was truly protecting Spitz's brother. Kamo reveals how the mayor was protecting me, mentioning how me actually loves Spitz's brother, flustering the two. Kamo states that they've done enough for today, heading off, prompting Ishiki to agree, leaving the others behind. With Spitz grateful for Kamo and Ishiki keeping his brother safe, Spitz keeps his side of the deal, sneaking into a library with hundreds of files, but is suddenly caught by the principal. The principal declares that Spitz will be heavily punished for committing such a crime, but upon hearing that Spitz will gladly accept any punishment, the principal asks Spitz for a favor. Having returned to Kamo's apartment, Spitz unfortunately mentions how Kamo's file didn't exist, revealing that the principal has instead sent a recorded message. With Kamo seeing that the message is a cipher, he declares that the cipher needs a password made from Ishiki and Spitz, prompting the three to all sit down. Kamo begins to read that the principal knows that there was some foul play behind Kamo's bloody training incident, revealing that there was actually an unknown blood stain found at the scene of the crime. Since no one could solve the case, Kamo was ultimately blamed, but worst of all, data of the unknown blood stains were wiped from Blue Academy and any existing police report. After hearing that Grizzly had died and that there was a strange marking resembling the one on Kamo's neck on Onodera's body, the principal reasoned that there was an even greater force at play and that Kamo is innocent. The principal warns Kamo of the House of M, something all three know is the greatest criminal family in history, with most of their cases unsolvable. The principal asks for Kamo to uncover who the House of M are, mentioning how there is a mole within Blue Academy. Hence, she had to message Kamo secretly. The principal reveals that she was friends with Kamo's parents, glad to see that Kamo had finally made friends, and trust that Kamo will get to the bottom of things. Fired up, Ishiki states that they now know who is behind everything, but Spitz warns Ishiki that all the Blue alumnus that went after the House of M ultimately died mysterious deaths. Standing up, Kamo can't help but shake at the excitement, declaring that he'll uncover who's behind everything. Elsewhere, we see a man calling out to his white-haired brother, Milo, mentioning how Chris the Ripper Killer wants to start a family and leave their business. Milo states that they should dispose of Chris and his family as soon as possible, but suddenly his brother Winter speaks up, wondering why they've allowed Kamo to live for so long. Milo reminds Winter that Kamo is still their family, wondering if Winter is pissed since they had to get rid of Alice. Milo reminds Winter that their House of M represents the House of Moriarty, and that they simply need to test Kamo and see if his Sherlock Holmes blood is stronger than his Moriarty blood. The season ends with Winter, the fourth son of the Moriarty family, heading off to Japan to test Kamo, all whilst Milo, the first son of the Moriarty household, wishes Winter the best. Cutting back to Kamo, he begins reflecting on his life, strangely afflicted after realizing the mark on his neck maybe had been caused by an outside source. Strangely enough, Kamo doesn't remember the House of M ever showing themselves, except for that one time where the strange police officer passed him at the lighthouse. At the same time, Milo receives word that Winter has landed at his destination, exciting Milo as he knows things will get interesting. Several days later, on a sunny day, we see Ishiki rushing through town, all whilst Winter seems to be reading up on some criminals. Although the criminals are allies to the House of M, Milo orders Winter to deal with them since the police have now identified them. Having met up with Amamiya, Ishiki and Amamiya greet the police officer at the scene of a crime along with the witness, but they both also realize Kamo is present. Having taken up the disguise of a sweets vendor, Amamiya is flustered as it's been a while since she's spoken with Kamo. Upon hearing that Kamo and Ishiki are working together on Kamo's fake sweets business, Amamiya gets jealous and is offered a contract to work with Kamo as well. As the three head to the scene of the crime, Kamo reveals that he had learned where Ishiki was heading via the GPS he placed on Ishiki, freaking Ishiki out. Arriving at the crime scene, the trio are horrified to see a mangled corpse skewered on a statue, something Amamiya believes is a killer's way of showing off. Upon further inspection, Kamo spots a cryptic-looking note attached to the victim, but when Kamo reads the note, he instantly recognizes the text comes from the revelation to John. Kamo declares that this current murder is different from all the rest, prompting the police to secure the crime scene along with the victim's body. The police report that the victim passed due to blood loss, suspecting that the victim was lowered onto the statue to be punctured, but the police are baffled as to how the culprit escaped. The police reveal that the surrounding buildings are purely commercial from floors 1 to 3, along with their current floor, on the rooftop of the building. Apparently last night, the police made their normal rounds inspecting the building, but at midnight, after there were no strange activities, the police turned on the infrared sensors and left for the night. When they returned the next morning, the victim's body was found, but strangely none of the infrared sensors picked up anything. Hearing all the details, Amamiya suspects that the culprit and the victim were present during the security's patrol, both barely missing each other. But this means the culprit could have still performed the murder and fled before the infrared sensors were turned on. Sadly, the police reveal that forensics say that the victim passed at 2 a.m. in the morning, debunking Amamiya's theory. At the same time, Kamo lays next to the corpse, promising to avenge them all whilst noting how the victim's palms seem to be scraped and clenched. Suddenly realizing something, Kamo calls for Ishiki to come over, admitting that he doesn't know who the culprit is, but Kamo does know the trick the murderer used. Having heard the details, Ishiki explains to Amamiya that the victim most likely was tied to the pillar above the statue, forced to hold onto the rope suspending them. Unfortunately, the victim's strength gave up around 2 a.m., leading to their death, something that makes Ishiki disgusted seeing as the note left behind details the torture the victim had to go through. Right on cue, the police report that the victim is Katsunami Yuji, being a 32-year-old cryptocurrency hacker. The police also add that the victim should have a marking on his neck, just like a branding, prompting Kamo to rush over to the corpse, spotting the letters 0 and 10 on the victim's neck. Confirming his suspicions, Kamo reveals that the markings are exactly like his own neck markings, both being from the Revelation of John, but Kamo's is a marking with the numbers 9 and 6. Hearing Kamo declare that the House of M is involved, Ishiki asks if everything could be a massive coincidence. But Kamo reassures Ishiki that the clues left behind are things Kamo can solve, almost like a direct challenge from the House of M themselves. Feeling both disgusted and pissed off, Kamo begins analyzing the clues, all whilst Amamiya wonders if the markings are shorthanded for something. Having put together the clues, Kamo states that the markings dictate the time of the next murder and the culprit plans on executing the victim's entire hacker team one by one. Although the 10 represents the next time a victim will appear, Kamo is still foggy on the 0, but seeing as it's already 9:30, Amamiya calls for backup immediately. Zooming out, Winter curses Kamo's deductive skills, declaring that he'll make Kamo feel despair. With Ishiki and Kamo walking around the area, Kamo suspects that the next victim will be nearby, suddenly receiving a report of the other 2 hackers on the team. Ishiki states that the 3 hackers' house was raided this morning, but it seems they weren't home, something the House of M must have caused. Additionally, policemen have begun to station themselves around stores containing the number 0, but both Ishiki and Kamo wonder what the 0 could mean. At that moment, Monkey appears, having been assigned to report on the Shibuya Mall Park murder. Monkey does wonder why Kamo is here, believing that Kamo is meant to be running his coffee stores, but luckily Ishiki comes up with a sound excuse. Ishiki takes the chance to ask if Monkey knows of any stores with a 0 nearby, but Monkey points out that the Shibuya bus stop has a terminal 0. Amazed by Monkey's intuition, Ishiki and Monkey begin rushing towards the terminal, but Kamo doesn't budge. Kamo states that the 0s on the 10 compared to the stray 0 was different, but seeing as there isn't much time, Kamo asks Ishiki to go on without him. Having made it to Terminal 0, Ishiki keeps his eyes peeled, realizing only 5 minutes are left before 10 o'clock. Elsewhere, Kamo begins heading past some chicken skewered stores, eavesdropping on a customer that asks the server to keep clear of touching their food too much. With all the pieces falling together, Kamo rushes to call Ishiki, revealing that the 0 isn't a number, but instead represents a 4-way intersection. Having made it to the scramble intersection, Kamo and Ishiki both cross the intersection at 10 o'clock, both scanning the area for the next victim. But suddenly smoke appears from the drain vents, enshrouding Kamo's view. As the smoke clears, the next victim is seen with an arrow through the heart, confusing Ishiki as the culprit killed the victim through the smoke. Realizing that the final member of the hacker team is also present, Ishiki chooses to chase after him, all whilst Kamo notices more symbols on the arrow itself. As Ishiki chases the hacker member through the streets of Shibuya, Ishiki suddenly loses sight of him, relieved to see that Spitz has arrived and has captured the hacker. The hacker begins begging for his life, offering to return all the money he stole. Upon arriving, Kamo learns that the hackers had trusted and listened to a strange person that promised to protect them when their covers were blown. The hacker is relieved he is being captured by the police, mentioning how the strange person's name was Mary Ito, a name Kamo knows can be rearranged to Moriarty. Kamo asks how the hacker knows Mary Ito was a man, hearing that the hacker team was formed by Mary, but the hackers only got to see the silhouette of Mary during their first meeting, offered a perfect crime by Mary that the hackers followed. The hacker reveals that everything was perfect, until one of the members slipped up and their identities were ultimately discovered. At that moment, the hacker receives a call from Mary, asked to put the call on speaker by Kamo. Answering the call, Mary demands that the hacker bring the money to Deltard Hotel by 11 o'clock, a location that matches the triangle and number 11 left on the arrow. When Ishiki offers to place the hacker under police protection, the hacker cries that he must go over to the hotel to personally hand in the money, fearing that Mary will chase after him for the rest of his life. Kamo reasons that the hacker is correct, as the House of M is a tricky enemy to deal with, especially since the House of M failed to reach the hacker before they could. Kamo turns to Ishiki, asking Ishiki to make an exception once. Back with Amamiya, she receives a call from Ishiki, notified that they'll be using the hacker to bait out the mastermind, something Amamiya is opposed to. Sadly, Ishiki hangs up on Amamiya, relieved to know that Amamiya won't be blamed for their upcoming plan. As they all head towards the hotel, Spitz chooses to scope out the surrounding area, all whilst the three head in. But suddenly, Ishiki bumps into Amamiya. Pulling Ishiki aside, Amamiya mentions how forensics had identified the arrow to house a mysterious metal tip. But judging by where the victim was struck, the police have identified the Deltard Hotel to be the location of where the arrow was fired. Amamiya says the police can arrest both the hacker and culprit if they just so happen to appear around 11 o'clock. But Amamiya warns Ishiki that if the police run into the hacker alone, they'll be forced to take the hacker off Ishiki's hands. Ishiki wonders why Amamiya is helping them so much, learning that Amamiya refuses to let their chance of capturing a psycho go, all whilst Kamo watches their conversation. At the same time, Winter reports to Milo that he's taken out 2 of the 3 hackers, but Milo asks that Winter not underestimate Kamo. Sitting at the hotel, Kamo deduces that there are 30 disguised officers within the hotel, impressed by Amamiya's power. At the same time, Ishiki is tasked with protecting the hacker, both choosing to hide in the men's bathroom, all whilst Kamo roams around the hotel. Kamo thinks about how the hacker hiding in the bathroom, along with a layer of disguised police, should keep the attacker at bay, but Kamo does admit something is off about their arrangement. Back with Ishiki, the hacker suddenly receives a call from Mary, pissed that the hacker is now involved with the police, calling off their deal. Desperate, the hacker sprints out of the bathroom, spotting the silhouette of a man that resembles Mary, only to beg them to reconsider. Suddenly realizing that something is off with the chandelier, Kamo cries to Ishiki that the chandelier is rigged, giving Ishiki and the hacker enough time to dodge the falling chandelier. Kamo reveals that the shadow of the chandelier looked different from the others, relieving everyone as the hacker has been saved. But upon hearing some music being played, Kamo knows that the culprit still has tricks up their sleeves. With Kamo clearly shaking, he decides to head off first, all whilst Ishiki catches Amamiya up. Ishiki explains that the music played is based off the Miracle Symphony, a story where a chandelier fell during the performance, but luckily no one was hurt, something that mirrors the present as the culprit must have predicted they would save the hacker. With Ishiki still unsure as to why the murder didn't just wrap things up here, Amamiya finally reveals that the tip of the arrow was infused with iridium, strange as iridium acts the same as any metal. Seeing as there are still too many unanswered questions, Amamiya states she'll take the hacker to the police station to be watched over. But as Amamiya leaves with the police, Spitz says he'll head over to inspect the cross-section more. With everyone gone, Kamo reveals a new message was left behind, uttering that iridium is group 9 and period 6 on the periodic table, a call back to Kamo's scar of 96. Kamo deduces that the final message is directed at Kamo, happy to see that things are finally coming to an end. Heading off with Ishiki relieved Kamo is asking for help. Seeing as the letter H is a marking for helipad, Kamo manages to find the only building with one, heading in only to learn that the helipad is closed for inspection. Using his police status, Ishiki manages to gain access to the helipad, impressed the culprit had planned for no one to witness their crimes. Riding an elevator onto the roof, Kamo and Ishiki stumble onto 2 men knocked out, suddenly noticing the elevator open once more. Appearing from the elevator is the hacker, uttering that the police car he was in was attacked, and a big guy in a helmet had sent the hacker to this exact location to hand Kamo his phone. Right then, Kamo receives a call from Mary, declaring that at 12 o'clock Kamo will feel despair. Seeing as everything finally makes sense, Kamo reveals that he solved the cross-section incident, declaring that the smoke screen would have made the crime impossible. Therefore, the murderer must have snuck in close and stabbed the victim, using the smoke screen to their advantage. Kamo asks if the hacker and Ishiki remember any suspicious people nearby, annoyed to hear that no one stands out in their memories, accidentally spilling some black syrup on the hacker. Offering a handkerchief to the hacker, Kamo accidentally drops the handkerchief, only to cry out that the hacker's disguise is pathetic, ripping off his face mask. As Winter tries to hide his face, he leaps back, but Kamo says he has already memorized Winter's face. Winter asks when Kamo had figured out his scheme, learning that Kamo had never trusted the solution to the triangle clue, as they were told the solution over the phone, making it possible to be a recorded call. Next, the chandelier falling made things perfect for the victim to come out unscathed, meaning the hacker was either an accomplice or the murderer themselves. When Kamo had figured out the crossing murder, the only option was that the murderer was the hacker in a disguise. But more importantly, Kamo demands to know where the real hacker is. Right on cue, as the clock strikes 12 o'clock, a massive explosion can be heard nearby, all whilst Winter reminds Kamo that he's powerless to save anyone. As Kamo and Ishiki rush to peek at the recent explosion, Winter reveals that the explosion signifies the death of the final hacker at 12 o'clock, but Ishiki is more worried about Amamiya. When Ishiki and Kamo try to call Amamiya, Winter notes how their phones shouldn't be working, something Kamo realizes is due to Winter planting strong magnets near the scanners when they first enter the building. Seeing Winter recounting how resolute Amamiya was when he strapped a bomb to her, Ishiki rushes to silence Winter, but Winter nonchalantly parries Ishiki's attacks, replying with a powerful kick to his stomach. Winter asks whether Kamo is feeling despair at the moment, but Kamo calls out the House of M as people who use tough riddles and kill either way. Winter curses Kamo for housing Moriarty's blood, but Kamo simply fires back by calling Winter a coward, learning from Winter that it's his role to outsmart Kamo, since Kamo's Sherlock blood makes them natural enemies. Before Ishiki can attack Winter again, Kamo stops him, revealing that he knows that the hacker and Amamiya are still alive, since the explosion is meant to trick Kamo into thinking he has failed as a detective. Knowing that the clues still remain, Ishiki begins to freak out, wondering what more could happen since they've already passed 12 o'clock, but Kamo suddenly realizes something, heading to peek at the explosion once more. Kamo declares that it hasn't passed noon yet, seeing as the phone they've been using has been set ahead of time, plus the explosion blew up the public clock. Impressed, Winter reveals that it is still 11:55, encouraging Kamo to try his best as Winter will concede if Kamo manages to figure out where Amamiya and the hacker are. Digging deep, Kamo reasons that the final trick must be related to 96, just like how every other crime scene has been. But Ishiki couldn't help but notice Kamo is the only thing that has the letter 96 on him. Laughing out of joy, Kamo realizes that Ishiki is correct, declaring that Amamiya and the hacker must be in the same building as him, all waiting to see if Winter approves. Seeing as Kamo has indeed figured out where Amamiya and the hacker are, Winter states that the bombs can simply be turned off and that the two are in the storage room in the building. Sadly, Kamo knows there isn't enough time, something Winter confirms since the elevator takes a minute to go down the building. And seeing as Amamiya and the hacker are at the bottom floor, Winter states Kamo has failed to save them. As the two stand off against each other, Kamo smirks, both watching as the clock finally strikes 12 o'clock. Surprisingly, no explosions can be heard, something Kamo reveals is thanks to Spitz listening in on them, due to the GPS tracker he had placed on Ishiki. Winter is in complete awe, realizing he has indeed been beat. With Kamo demanding to know if Winter is part of the House of M, Winter's shaken expression confirms it for Kamo, wanting to know more about his 96 marking. Winter says Kamo is not worthy of such a marking, mentioning how Kamo is the 6th generation in the Holmes lineage. Plus, Kamo's 96 is a callback to the Revelation of John, where the passage refers to someone wanting to die but can only suffer. Kamo deduces that the 6 in his scar refers to him being the 6th generation, something Winter doesn't deny. But Kamo also points out how Winter is being controlled, not actually wanting to kill Kamo. Winter cries for Kamo to be silent, suddenly confessing to being the one who slaughtered the first victims. But this triggers Kamo's hypnotic eye, ordering Winter to jump to his death. Luckily, Winter had already predicted such a thing, having plugged his ears, but Winter does blow up the railing of his own free will. Kamo mocks Winter for running away now, but Winter warns Kamo to be careful as he won't be getting a second chance. Out of nowhere, Milo's voice can be heard, declaring that Winter himself won't be getting a second chance, suddenly struck through the heart by a bullet, only to fall off the building. As a lone assassin retreats into the darkness, Kamo and Ishiki confirm that Winter has indeed been hit, falling to his death. In the aftermath of the attacks, Ishiki learns that the hacker had taken his own life with a poison pill, something that freaks Amamiya out. On a lighter note, Amamiya had met Spitz, believing Spitz to be working with Kamo on his candy business. Amami East reports that all 3 hackers were ultimately killed, plus the culprit took their own life, asking Ishiki to deal with the inspection of the culprit's corpse since Amamiya needs some rest. Heading to the mortuary room, Ishiki begins inspecting Winter's corpse, but later that night, he reports to Spitz and Kamo that the corpse did not belong to Winter. Kamo praises the House of M for covering up any of their involvement in the aftermath, deducing that Winter's body must have been caught as it was falling, only for a dummy body to be thrown as replacement. Ishiki reasons that he needs to change his mindset if they'll be pitted against such a formidable crime organization, but Spitz takes the chance to reveal that Winter was the name of the man that was shot on the roof. Kamo knows that overall the crimes were quite fair, curious as to who called for Winter to be silenced, knowing that this final boss will be the person that runs the House of M. With Kamo declaring he'll get to the bottom of things, we cut to Milo, who is receiving reports from his butler confirming that all aspects of their involvement have been erased as usual. Milo asks how Winter is doing, hearing that Winter will pass away soon. As Milo heads out, he asks for the assassin to be removed as well, failing to murder Winter with their bullet, all whilst Kamo ponders on who this brother figure Winter desperately pleaded with. With several days passing by, Ishiki visits the crime scenes once more, saddened to see that time moves even though no criminal was caught in the end. Heading towards Kamo's apartment, Ishiki spots a moving truck, curious as to who would move into the same run-down apartment as Kamo. Seeing as the visitor has dropped some coins, Ishiki rushes to pick them up, only to realize Mafu is the new resident. Sitting down with Kamo, Mafu reveals that she's found a solution for Kamo's hypnotic curse, but Kamo needs to be sedated with some heavy medicine. In other news, Mafu is moving in with Kamo as she had recently been kicked out of her old apartment, something that also helps Kamo as Mafu can now help monitor Kamo until she finds her new apartment. Seeing Mafu acting strange, the boys spot Mafu glaring at her phone, shocked to see her phone is completely shattered but still works. Picking up the call, Mafu's assistant learns Mafu has moved from her apartment, reminding Mafu of her upcoming operation. Seeing as she needs to get back to work, Mafu begins to leave, inspiring the boys as Mafu is one of the top brain surgeons in the world, but quickly stops to return Kamo's cat who had snuck into her bag. Now alone, Ishiki asks Kamo if relying on dangerous drugs is the way to solve his curse. But Kamo reminds Ishiki that the House of M has gotten away because his curse took over and he wasn't able to finish the job. Seeing Kamo getting worked up, Ishiki asks if Kamo would like to take a little break over the summer, hearing that Kamo always wanted to pull strings from string beans under fireworks, shell peanuts on a mountain during nightfall, and eat black sugar syrup shaved ice on the beach. Before Kamo can continue, Ishiki reckons visiting the beach is their most manageable option, wondering if they should invite Spitz, who secretly listens in on their conversation, excited to hear Ishiki considers them close friends. As Ishiki leaves, he asks that Kamo not start the drugging process just yet, spotting Mafu conveniently outside. Mafu explains her surgery was cancelled and has returned to rest, prompting Kamo to suggest she visit the beach with them, seeing as Mafu is constantly busy and stressed out. Just like that, the gang head to a secluded beach, exciting Kamo as his sights are on the black sugar syrup shaved ice. As the gang head to a nearby store, the clerk apologizes, having run out of shaved ice, even though it hasn't reached noon. Appearing alongside the clerk, the manager apologizes once more, confirming that their shaved ice is the most popular, horrifying Kamo as he splits a watermelon with his head. Heading to rest on the beach, the gang munch on the split watermelon, all whilst Ishiki wonders what else Kamo would like to do on the beach. Wanting to cheer Kamo up as well, Mafu changes in her beach wear all whilst playing with a platypus costume, something Kamo wanted to wear while swimming and eating shaved ice. With Mafu heading off to swim, the boys suddenly overhear the store manager arguing with some men, demanding the men leave as he has no business with them. Seeing the men getting worked up, the store manager calls for any police around, finally scaring the men off. As the men leave, Kamo smirks, dragging Ishiki along all whilst telling the men that Ishiki is a policeman and can help with their dispute. Giving in, the men reveal that they've been present since yesterday to surf, and one of their friends had gotten food poisoning from the manager's store and suddenly disappeared. Apparently, the friend had visited the manager last night, but hasn't returned, and his phone is nowhere to be found, nor has he returned home. At that moment, Mafu signals for the boys' help, revealing that she has discovered a corpse. With the men confirming that the corpse belongs to their lost friend Mamba, Mafu suspects it to be drowning. When the gang learns that Mamba was all alone last night, Kamo declares that Mamba was murdered. As police arrive to inspect the area, Ishiki greets the local police officers, learning that Mamba is a 25-year-old office worker. Introducing herself as well, Mafu explains her examination into Mamba's body leads her to suspect the victim passed around 2 and 3 in the morning. Mafu also points out Mamba's hands have turned red and there are residues of alcohol on the victim. Apparently, the men were drinking late last night when Mamba suddenly stormed off into the night at around 10 p.m. Hearing all of this, the officer states this must have been an accident, seeing as there were no outstanding wounds on the victim's corpse, plus Mamba is dressed in surfing gear. Butting in, Kamo reveals that Mamba is in a dry suit, something people wear when they go diving or yachting, but not what surfers wear, especially one that's too large for the victim. With the men chiming in as well, revealing that on the day Mamba got the stomach ache from the manager's food, he spent the whole day watching the others on the beach. The men think it's hard to believe Mamba would surf at night, adding that their surfboards were disorganized this morning, believing it to be the work of Mamba. Out of nowhere, the officers ask who Kamo is, throwing Kamo off, as his cover may have been blown. Luckily, Mafu says Kamo is her assistant, someone who loves mysteries, but the officer asks everyone to leave the rest to them. With our trio walking on the beach, Kamo apologizes for letting loose, but Ishiki wonders why Mafu would cover for them. Kamo reveals that Mafu knows about his secret, something Mafu promises to keep confidential as she is a doctor. Suddenly feeling relieved, Ishiki voices how nice it is that another person has accepted Kamo for who he is, something Mafu is happy to do since Kamo is helping others with his detective work. Cutting over to the manager, his employee hesitates to bring him eggs, seeing as they're expired, but the manager could care less. Cracking the spoiled eggs into his dishes, the manager gleefully smirks, declaring that everyone is so easy to fool. Waiting out the day, the manager reminds his employee to hand out the flyers, jokingly asking his employee to turn himself in when he hears police have locked down the scene after discovering the corpse. With the manager housing an evil grin, we cut to our trio asking the manager if he knows anything about the corpse, pissing Mafu off seeing how nonchalant the manager is behaving. Kamo brings up the fact that the victim was a surfer in a dry suit, hearing the manager state that surfers kicking the bucket is a common occurrence. The manager reveals that the dry suit must have belonged to the yachting guys, believing they got the suits from the boathouse, piquing Kamo's curiosity as the manager knows quite a lot. The manager simply brushes off all suspicions, having experienced a lot, even knowing that the victim went for a swim during the night of his death. But Kamo wonders why the manager thinks the victim went for a swim when they had all the gear to go surfing. Caught off guard, the manager retracts his statement, but Kamo presses, asking how the manager killed the victim. Clearly joking, Kamo pisses off the manager, but Ishiki clarifies they are here to ask about what happened to the victim last night, having heard the victim visited the manager at 10 o'clock at night. The manager states that last night he was at a party before 10 o'clock and had stayed at the party till 2 to 3 in the morning, even having witnesses to back up his claims. The manager adds that he noticed a drunk sometime at night during high tide with a floral shirt, prompting Kamo to reveal that the victim had a floral shirt on, but the manager fires back stating he never claimed that the drunk he saw was the victim. Having had enough, the manager reminds everyone that he is 100% innocent, smirking as he asks everyone to piss off. As the manager leaves, Kamo reveals they never explained the victim passed away, making the manager quite suspicious. Later that day, the manager welcomes some customers, but due to the state of his store, the customers swiftly leave. When the employee points out some more spoiled food items, the manager screams for the employee to be silent and serve what they have, suddenly spotting Kamo asking about his fridge and freezer. Freaked out, the manager orders Kamo to leave, but Kamo states he simply wants a meal with fresh eggs. Still sad the manager had run out of shaved ice. Leaving to meet up with the others, Kamo hears Mafu point out how annoying the manager's alibi is, making Ishiki realize the manager could have left the drunken victim near the beach where the high tide could have swept up the body. Sadly, Kamo states that they would need to examine the body more, as the body would have had sand in their mouths if they drowned near the shores. With Ishiki completely out of ideas, he suddenly stumbles onto a burnt part of his meal, annoyed Mafu as she states she'll demand a refund for the manager's poor service. With Mafu heading towards the store, Kamo warns Mafu to not be too clumsy, but right on cue, an eagle swoops by, snatching the food from Mafu's hand only to trip her up. As the boys rush to check up on Mafu, Mafu points out how salty the sand is, giving Kamo all the pieces he needs to declare he's solved the case. Having closed down the beach entirely, the trio apologize to the manager, explaining that they need to gather everyone to give them a little health and safety announcement, especially after Ishiki received some birth food. That evening, the gathered crowd all listened to Ishiki as he declares the victim's death was not accidental and was in fact murdered by someone present. The local police remind Ishiki that everyone present has an alibi and the victim passed in the ocean, but Ishiki states the victim was indirectly killed with a delay. Without hesitation, Ishiki accuses the manager to be the culprit, pointing out how suspicious it was for the manager to have no shaved ice, even though the beach was deserted. Ishiki declares the manager's lack of shaved ice was due to him using the ice to build a raft, something the manager doesn't deny. Ishiki states that the night before, the victim had visited the manager whilst drunk, but the manager refused to answer the victim's complaints. After a while, the manager realized the victim had fallen asleep, coming up with a scheme to get rid of him. Having crafted an ice raft, the manager had strapped the victim to the raft and sent him off in a sea with a wet suit, removing any evidence of the victim being tied up. After a while, the victim awoke, struggling to cling onto the ice, but eventually the ice melted and the victim was plunged into the ocean. Mafu also points out the victim's frostbitten hands are due to the victim clinging onto the ice for dear life, but the manager states that the shaved ice blocks are way too small to build a raft. Ishiki butts in, revealing the manager used salt to fuse the small blocks together, stating that if they test the sand, they'll be able to confirm an unusual abundance of salt. The manager says the salt must be because he frequently cooks nearby, but Ishiki threatens to compare his sales and orders to see if he truly uses that much salt. The manager also brings up how he left the freezer open last night, causing all the ice to melt, but the employee states he had locked everything up before he left, causing the manager to silence his employee with a shove. Knowing that there still isn't enough evidence against him, the manager stays firm, stating he's innocent. But Kamo praises the manager for attending the party he went to along with dragging the victim from their lodgings. Frightened, the manager wonders if Kamo is joking, smirking as he declares he never saw the victim last night. With the manager's statement, Ishiki reveals that they found the manager's fingerprints all over some surfboards, believing the manager wanted to make the victim's death a surfing accident, but failed to identify their surfboard and simply gave up. Ishiki also adds that they know the manager has already had 3 health complaints, and another one will surely shut down the manager's store for good. Completely backed into a corner, the manager offers to admit to murder in exchange for a lighter sentence, stating that he himself was a victim. But Mafu steps up, slapping the manager for valuing a human life so lightly. Flashing back, Kamo is seen worried about his curse kicking in once they capture the murderer. asking Mafu if he can take the medicine. In the present, Kumo is seen acting normal, triumphantly asking for the manager to be arrested. But Kumo does seem to forget who Ishiki and Mafu are suddenly collapsing due to the medicine. Having returned home, Kumo sleeps on his floor, happy to see Ishiki is visiting him. Ishiki reveals the case has been wrapped up. As for Kumo, he had been asleep for a whole day, grunting about Max and Molly. Kumo states that Max and Molly were kids at his birthday party when he was younger, but for some reason Kumo can't remember the third person present during the celebration. Ishiki states that the side effect of medicine is due to Mafu not knowing everything about Kumo's curse. But before Kumo can despair more, Ishiki states he has gotten permission to use the medicine whenever, hoping to make their detective solving easier moving forward. At the same time, we see a mysterious man greeting a terrified woodcarver, declaring that no one is a match for his brilliance. At a cafe, Kumo hears Ishiki has connections with someone in the idol business. Excited to report they'll get some Nihonian tickets. Seeing as Kumo doesn't know who Nihonian is, Kumo listens to Omoi Nihonian's music, learning that Nihonian had initially debuted as a composer, but has since used her face and voice to garner more attention. Heading for a walk, Kumo sees there had been a report of a kidnapping of a genius woodcarver, but they seem to have released him after 3 days. Seeing as this all happened when Kumo was asleep, Ishiki tells Kumo the kidnapper has the alias of Hummingbird, someone who has eluded capture for a while. Ishiki points out that this particular abductor is a genius, having made a 5-star chef cook them a meal, an artist create them a painting, and even had a sculpture carve a Buddha statue for them. Kumo also deduces that the abductor must have lured in their victims with love letters, something Ishiki is surprised Kumo was able to figure out. Pissed, Kumo demands to know why Ishiki hadn't told him about this case until now. But Ishiki says since the people captured are eventually released, there wasn't any need to prioritize this abductor. Before Kumo can run off in search of the hummingbird, Ishiki reminds Kumo they need to attend Nihonian's concert first, both amazed by the amount of people who have also gathered. Scanning the area, Kumo spots a strange man in a mask watching videos of a genius pop maker and ballerina. Excited as Kumo walks over to the man, offering to guess the mysterious man's job title. Kumo says his job requires he is able to read his customers, prompting the masked man to put away his earbuds, welcoming Kumo to guess his job title. Kumo starts by stating the man's sleight of hand movement reminds him of magicians, but seeing as the man has a bulky watch, Kumo infers the man has another title. Seeing the man earlier admiring the talents of others, Kumo declares the masked man to be the hummingbird the abductor, or rather an admirer of the man. With Ishiki running over, he apologizes for Kumo's sudden outburst, pulling Kumo aside as the concert is finally starting. As the boys head inside, the masked man is impressed by how perceptive Kumo is. With the concert starting, the crowd roars, all excited to see Nihonian introducing one of her new songs. Dimming the lights, Nihonian lets loose her voice, bringing everyone to tears as the tune seamlessly captivates the crowd. Having finished the concert, Kumo admits Nihonian is quite gifted, interested as to why Nihonian was on hiatus until now. Just then, Higuchi calls out to Ishiki, revealed to be the one who hooked Ishiki up with the tickets, but Higuchi cries they are in need of a policeman. Rushing to Nihonian's showroom, Ishiki reads over a love letter from the hummingbird, turning to Higuchi and Nihonian's manager only to ask them for details. Mitsuhashi, Nihonian's manager, says they received the letter along with a brand new guitar when Nihonian returned from her performance, but Ishiki wonders how someone could have snuck in a guitar. Kumo believes the culprit must have done it prior to the concert, flustering Nihonian as she gazes at Kumo, but Ishiki wonders who used the venue the day prior. Upon hearing that a party was scheduled yesterday but was suddenly canceled, Ishiki asks for Higuchi to find out who rented out the venue yesterday. With the scheduled day written on Nihonian's love letter arriving, Ishiki is amazed 100 police have arrived to secure the area. Namasu, the head of the Special Crimes Unit, cries he'll protect Nihonian at all cost. Although Ishiki is stiff at first, Namasu reminds Ishiki that Ishiki had been specifically selected for this mission. Heading off to Nihonian's home, Namasu mentions how Nihonian and her manager had specifically requested that Nihonian be guarded at home, wanting to still write songs whilst being guarded. Ishiki wonders why there are so few guards stationed at her home, but Namasu reveals that a previous case had hundreds of guards protecting the victim, but Hummingbird simply released bees to scare them all off only to capture the target afterwards. This time, Namasu plans on stationing only a select few. As for the rest, they are to set up a perimeter around Nyeonyeon to guard her. Knocking on Nyeonyeon's door, Ishiki is surprised to see Kumo had been invited by Nyeonyeon, having donned his alias of a sweet store owner. Just then, Namasu receives a report that the Yamanashi Police Department will be joining them. Spotting Sanu and his team roll up only to reveal they also received a letter from the Hummingbird. Sanu reminds Namasu that Nyeonyeon's home lies in his jurisdiction as well. Plus, now that he too has received a letter from Hummingbird, they will join in on protecting Nyeonyeon. Handing Namasu the new letter, Namasu confirms that the letter does indeed belong to the Hummingbird. But before Namasu can secure the evidence, Sanu snatches away the letter stating that he'll be taking over from here. But Namasu can collaborate with them. Pissed, Namasu scolds his team for letting other officers in without his permission. But Sanu takes the chance to greet Kumo, intrigued to see a non-officer at Nyeonyeon's home. As Kumo serves up some sweets, Kumo asks about the history of the house, hearing that the original building burnt down, leaving only the clock tower which Nyeonyeon's new house was built around. Seeing various fire alarms around the house, Sanu praises Nyeonyeon for her smart thinking, but recommends they move Nyeonyeon to a location no one else can reach. Heading up the clock tower, Nyeonyeon reveals she uses the clock tower as her composition room, prompting Namasu to survey the room. As Namasu heads over to check out some windows, Nyeonyeon suddenly cries not to open them, reminding everyone she has a massive fear of heights. With Mitsuhashi comforting Nyeonyeon, Namasu notes how the windows are big enough for a single person to fit in, but the policemen on the ground confirm anyone scaling the clock tower will be easily visible. Having confirmed the room will be Nyeonyeon's safe haven, the gang leave Nyeonyeon in the clock tower, all surprised to see Mitsuhashi slam and lock the door leading up the clock tower. Going over the formation, Namasu has 4 of his men securing the front yard, Sanu has 4 of his men in the backyard, and Ishiki, Sanu and Namasu will personally remain inside the house. Seeing as Nyeonyeon is locked in the clock tower from the outside, Sanu declares that not even an ant can reach Nyeonyeon, impressing Kumo as he serves the gang some donuts. As Sanu warns everyone to not underestimate the Hummingbird, the gang continue to patrol Nyeonyeon's home, but Kumo takes the chance to serve another of his sweet treats. Kumo jokes about being abducted himself since he's proud of his black sugar syrup concoctions, but Sanu reminds Kumo that the Hummingbird only abducts those with otherworldly talent. Turning to face Sanu, Kumo declares he is a master of deduction, asking the Hummingbird to test him, but suddenly a fire alarm rings throughout the house. As the sprinklers flood the house, Mitsuhashi reports that there is no fire in the house, cutting to Sanu, Kumo, and Ishiki rushing up the clock tower. Seeing as it's locked, Ishiki asks Mitsuhashi for the keys, barging open the door, continuing up the stairs. Sadly, the gang realize that Nyeonyeon has disappeared, spotting a window open, only for Sanu to praise the brilliance of the Hummingbird to have abducted Nyeonyeon from them. But Kumo declares the show has only just begun. With Namasu pissed at his shortcomings, Mitsuhashi collapses to the ground, pissed that even 100 police couldn't stop the Hummingbird. Checking outside, Namasu hears the police on duty never spotted anyone climbing through the window, but seeing as the staircase was guarded by Ishiki and Sanu, Sanu declares that the Hummingbird truly is a genius. As Mitsuhashi states that she is unaware of any secret rooms in the clock tower, Namasu rushes to inform his men guarding the perimeter of Nyeonyeon's house, asking Ishiki to scan the house once more with Mitsuhashi. As for Kumo, he stays back asking if Sanu has already given up, but Sanu says he was simply admiring the Hummingbird's brilliance. Sanu says he'll be the one to catch the Hummingbird, asking Kumo if he thinks he can beat him to it, but Kumo corrects Sanu, betting on Ishiki to be the one to come out on top. Catching up with Ishiki, Kumo follows Mitsuhashi into a storage room, surprising her when she notices some thick blinds have been removed, as they are meant to keep the music equipment out of direct sunlight. Kumo asks if Nyeonyeon uses all the instruments in the storage room, but Mitsuhashi admits she's not sure, instead asked by Sanu if she recognizes anything unusual about Nyeonyen's computer. When Mitsuhashi says she can't read the music Nyeonyen has created, Kamo suggests they listen to what Nyeonyen has on her computer, but Mitsuhashi strangely mentions how the music on Nyeonyen's computer will be too quiet for them. Acting strange, Mitsuhashi corrects herself, saying the song on Nyeonyen's computer is clearly incomplete, leading everyone around to inspect the fire alarms. Upon confirming that the firearms had been rigged and triggered from an outside source, Mitsuhashi mentions how the fire alarms were inspected a month ago, surprising Kamo, as the hummingbird must have used that inspection to rig the fire alarms. With Sanu heading elsewhere with his men, Kamo hears Ishiki reveal that all of the hummingbird's captives have never once filed a charge against the hummingbird, intriguing Kamo as he glances at Sanu. Heading outside, Kamo asks Ishiki to call up Monkey, asking Ishiki to tell her about his theory. Later that day, Namasu returns annoyed they have yet to track down the hummingbird fleeing, but Sanu takes the chance to declare that the hummingbird is still in the house. Pointing his finger at Mitsuhashi, Sanu mentions how when the first rushed up the staircase, Mitsuhashi was the last to follow. Sanu reveals that when the fire alarm first rang, Nyeonyen must have stood on the other side of the door, only to be trapped behind it when everyone ran up. When Mitsuhashi finally ran up the staircase, she found Nyeonyen behind the door, drugging her only to drag her away. Seeing Mitsuhashi shocked, Sanu says Nyeonyen must be hidden away in a separate room, believing it to be a panic room of some sort, but Mitsuhashi doesn't know what Sanu is talking about. Approaching Mitsuhashi, Sanu says he'll be taking her to the police station to interrogate her, but Kamo interrupts, declaring that Sanu's theory is flawed. Giving Ishiki the talking stick, Ishiki says the real culprit must be an officer in disguise. Right on cue, Namasu receives a call of a suspicious man heading down the mountain, rushing towards the location before Ishiki can say anything else. Seeing an opening, Sanu says he'll still be taking Mitsuhashi in for interrogation, believing her to be an accomplice of Hummingbird, but Ishiki states it's impossible seeing as Mitsuhashi's is the real Nyeonyen. With Sanu confused, Ishiki continues to press Mitsuhashi, ultimately getting Mitsuhashi to admit she is indeed Nyeonyen. Wondering what gave it away, Ishiki reveals that earlier, Mitsuhashi had pointed out the low levels on the computer Nyeonyen had left behind, letting slip her amazing knowledge in music composition. Next, Mitsuhashi had never actually walked towards the windows, having an extreme fear of heights, and so her body double-acted scared as to give her a reason to remain near the stairs and away from the window. Seeing Mitsuhashi not denying any of it, Sanu asks who the other lady was, learning that she was simply another singer from Mitsuhashi's agency. Mitsuhashi reveals she had never wanted to show off her face, searching for any excuse to quit the music industry and live in peace. Mitsuhashi says the pressure for each of the compositions to be greater than the previous is too much for her, and her love for music is faded, something Ishiki and Sanu feel sympathy for. Apologizing for accusing Mitsuhashi, Sanu says he'll head towards Namasu and the others, but Kamo asks Sanu to bring them with him, mentioning how Ishiki has other theories as to who the hummingbird is. Happy to oblige, Kamo sits in the front whilst Mitsuhashi and Ishiki sit in the back. When Sanu asks Ishiki to further explain his theories, Kamo offers to explain them instead, starting with how Nyeonyen vanished. Kamo deduces that when the fire alarm first rang out, the actor playing Nyeonyen would rush away from the fire below her towards the clock tower's window, spotting Sano's policeman holding out a safety net for her to jump to. Seeing as it was her only choice, the actor must have jumped without hesitation, explaining why the thick curtains vanished from the storage room. Kamo continues to deduce that Hummingbird must have disguised as a detective in order to pass through the police's impenetrable security, plus Hummingbird would be able to nonchalantly leave without any suspicion. With everything falling into place, Kamo declares Sanu to be Hummingbird, prompting Sanu to pull over as he is impressed he was figured out. Sanu says he was surprised that Nyeonyen's actor jumped from the clock tower, seeing as the real Nyeonyen would be too afraid to do such a thing. Sanu deduced the manager to be the real Nyeonyen. Sanu reassures Mitsuhashi that her actor double is safe, but Ishiki is more intrigued to know why Sanu kidnaps people, leading Sanu to admit he does everything for his daughter. Sanu's wife had unfortunately passed when she gave birth to Sanu's now 13-year-old child, but seeing his wife's musical talent in his daughter, Sanu had forced his daughter to train relentlessly to meet his expectations. Sadly, the pressure he exuded onto her drove her crazy, forcing her to shut herself off from others. But occasionally Sanu's daughter would cry seeing masters of their craft on television. It was the belief that he could revive his daughter that he began kidnapping the geniuses of the world, and when Sanu would explain his situation to his victims, they would happily greet his daughter. As for Sanu, he would remain outside, barely able to hear his daughter's laughter, but he treasured those moments. Although it's a heartwarming story, Ishiki still places Sanu under arrest, demanding to know where Nyeonyeon's actor is. Instructed to check the trunk, Ishiki pops the trunk, spotting a letter that reveals the actor to be in the backyard. Upon heading to the driver's seat, Ishiki realizes Kumo let Sanu flee. Flashing back to earlier when Kumo had contacted Monkey, he had asked to learn why the people the hummingbird abducted never filed charges against their abductor. Monkey mentions how all the people abducted ended up creating masterpieces after being abducted, actually being grateful after meeting Hummingbird. Kumo suspects that Sanu's daughter crying were moments when she had met others just like her, forced to hone and suffered due to their talents. Hearing Kumo's painting Hummingbird like a fairy that brings those cursed by their gifts together, Mitsuhashi takes out a letter, reflecting on her life. In the next coming days, Nyeonyeon is reported to have shattered all of her records, seen playing alongside her actor double. Visiting Kumo on his off days, Ishiki is horrified to see Kumo playing with toy dinosaurs, learning that Kumo is simply reenacting his memories from when he was 3 years old. Having unlocked most of them due to Mafu's medicine, Kumo says he's trying to sort out the memories before he was 6 years of age, remembering when he was 3 years old, he was playing dinosaurs with his neighbors Max and Molly, but for some reason he can't remember who the mysterious person next to him was. Seeing as Ishiki still hasn't brought him any cases, Kumo says they should visit Monkey instead. Heading to Tokyo University, Ishiki says Monkey is at the university to gather some evidence, hearing from Kumo that they should continue to grow close to crime reporters. Greeting Monkey, Monkey voices how excited she is to see the amazing detective Ishiki once more, but gets annoyed seeing as Kumo is tagging along. Thinking up an excuse, Kumo declares he has been inspired by Ishiki's detective work, hoping to become as great as Ishik in the future. Respecting Kumo's life choice, Monkey treats Kumo as an equal, all heading through the university. As the trio are guided by Professor Aoi through the halls, Kumo notices them passing by an MRI room, only to enter Professor Murayama's laboratory. Sadly, Murayama is away, but Aoi still introduces their research to focus on cognitive psychology. Seeing as this is the perfect chance, Kumo asks why someone would be missing some of their memories, leading Aoi to suggest that Kumo is suffering from dissociative amnesia, possibly due to some trauma. Just then, one of Aoi's student researchers reminds Aoi that he has a meeting, rushing off as he leaves Himino to help out our trio. As Aoi leaves, Himino voices how gifted Aoi is, having published various groundbreaking papers at such a young age, something Monkey resonates with, feeling the same towards the ace detective Ishiki. The other student researchers are annoyed at how loud the trio are, but Himino continues to give our trio a guide around the lab. Kumo points out the shielded room the researchers have access to, a room that is used to conduct experiments without the interference of sound, radio, or magnetic waves. Taking a peek inside, the gang are surprised to see the confined space, learning that all data must be kept in the lab for confidentiality purposes. Himino points out that they also collaborate with the others to use the MRI lab nearby, equipment found in hospitals, but thanks to Aoi's reputation, they have access to such expensive equipment. Before Monkey and Himino can fangirl some more, Imai and Ogawa begin arguing over who reserved the experiment room first in the afternoon. Pissed, Nikki asks Himino to resolve the conflict, pointing out how Himino acts as the teacher's pet whenever Aoi is around. Wrapping up the tour, Himino apologizes for her lab members, but Ishiki reassures Himino that they are all human and they must be stressed about their research. Kumo butts in, suggesting that Himino be more confident and show off her skills to silence the haters, pleasing Himino as she promises to continue working hard. Before the gang leave, Monkey and Himino exchange phone numbers, cutting to the next day, where Ishiki and Kamo are enjoying some coffee. Out of nowhere, Monkey suddenly calls, only to terrify Ishiki as he hears Monkey crying. Calming Monkey down, Ishiki learns that an explosion occurred at the lab and that Himino is dead. Arriving on scene, Ishiki greets Amamiya, stating that he knew the person that passed away. Amamiya reports that the shielded room had supposedly been filled with flammable gas, only to be opened and ignited with a heat source, ultimately causing an explosion. Believing the heat gun to have ignited the gas, Amamiya suspects the incident to have been a murder attempt, something that makes Ishiki tremble in anger. When Ishiki asks to be in charge of this case, Amamiya says she can't trust a nervous wreck like him to lead the case. But suddenly Amamiya gets a call. Seeing Amamiya pretend to answer a call, Ishiki is shocked to hear that Amamiya will leave the case to Ishiki, swearing to get to the bottom of the mystery. Calling up Monkey, Ishiki tells Monkey he'll be taking the case, inspiring Monkey to pick herself up and meet Ishiki at the crime scene. Before Ishiki can break down crying, Kamo reminds Ishiki they have a murder to solve, heading to Aoi's lab only to ask Aoi what he was doing yesterday. With Kamo glancing at a picture frame on Aoi's desk, Aoi explains that he was performing experiments using MRI machines, but notes how the experiment room's light was off when he passed by last night. Kamo wonders if the equipment lost will be expensive to replace, but Aoi points out that the data is what is priceless along with Himino's life. Seeing Aoi distraught, Ishiki promises to do everything he can to retrieve the data, but asks if Aoi found anything strange recently. Suddenly reminded of something, Aoi hands Ishiki a letter sent to the lab recently. But upon opening the letter, Ishiki and Kamo are shocked to see it's a death threat to Himino. Ishiki concludes that the culprit had targeted Himino from the very beginning and must have known Himino would be using the shielded room in the morning. Gathering up the other research students, Ishiki says the research students are in charge of scheduling, asking if any of them knew Himino would be using the shielded lab this morning. With a moment of silence, the research students all admit to knowing Himino would use the shielded room in the morning, having drawn lottery slips to see who would get to use it. Kamo confirms that no one apart from them three knew of the scheduling, meaning one of the three students must have set up the explosion trap. When Ishiki asks what the students were doing this morning, they all mention how they woke up and arrived on campus at 9, but all claim to be innocent. Imai takes the chance to accuse Ugawa of purposely deleting Himino's data, and was even reported to the university by Himino herself. Ugawa fires back by pointing out how Imai had a crush on Himino, but became Himino's stalker after she refused to date him. Finally, Imai calls out Nikki for hating Himino the most, having been warned by Himino constantly for canceling on various MRI experiments. Even more sad to see their data lost compared to Himino's life. Seeing the students arguing, Kamo asks why canceling an MRI experiment is such a big deal, learning that maintenance on such an expensive machine is expensive, so they should be using it more and cancellations are forbidden by Aoi. Having thought of something, Kamo leaves in search of the logs for the lab, followed by Ishiki, who asks what is on Kamo's mind. Kamo points out how the death threat Himino received was issued yesterday and arrived today. Not lining up as Himino using the shielded room was only decided last night after the letter was sent off. Checking out the logs, Professor Murayama and Aoi seem to have used the labs frequently, up until Murayama went overseas. Ishiki says Aoi didn't use the lab at all this week, allowing Himino and Ugawa to use it more often, but Nikki and Imai seem to use the lab in the afternoon. Suddenly realizing something, Kamo scans the logs once more, stating he has no idea what the motive of the killer is, but Kamo has identified their murderer.